Thank you so much for taking care of the kids. Margaret, my son's wife, said cheerfully. Don't mention it. We were looking forward to seeing our grandchildren too. I'm relieved to hear that. Taking care of the grandchildren is truly a pleasure, isn't it? Then, with a sly smile, Margaret makes an outrageous demand. Since it's such a joy to see your adorable grandchildren, I'll be charging $500 per child. You're joking, right? Margaret stops laughing and replies with a serious face. I'm not joking. I'm entrusting strangers with my precious children. It's only natural to ask for a rental fee. Strangers? A rental fee? I felt sad hearing the words that came from Margaret's mouth. Without showing any remorse, Margaret continues. For example, men who don't have girlfriends pay to go on dates with women, right? It's the same thing. My husband, Mark, and I exchanged looks of disbelief. If that's your attitude, we won't be taking care of the grandchildren. Neglecting your parenting duties? This is why the elderly are disliked in society these days. I'm sorry, but I have a plane to catch. Margaret, wait. My name is Elizabeth. With my beloved husband, Mark, I've lived a life of over 40 years, side by side. It's been a journey too complex to describe in just a few words, filled with endless struggles. But I believe these hardships only deepened our bond and made our time together invaluable. We married in our 20s and struggled to have children for a while. Both sets of parents were eager to see their grandchildren, which gradually put a lot of pressure on me. But Mark was always there to support me gently. He cooperated with fertility treatments and would even visit places said to bless couples with children after work. Thanks to his efforts, we were blessed with a son, David, on our 10th wedding anniversary. David was frail as a child, needing constant attention. But Mark did everything he could to support me, making parenting never feel like a burden. David grew up without major illness or injury and became the star of his high school basketball team, showing just how resilient he had become. Although he struggled with his studies, he managed to graduate from college and started working as a salesperson at a well-known electronics manufacturer, where he met and married Margaret at the age of 30. When our first grandchild was born, Mark, perhaps reminded of our struggles to conceive, sobbed uncontrollably. Despite all our hardships, we overcame them together, and now in retirement, Mark and I enjoy a leisurely life. We haven't seen them in a while, but I wonder how the grandchildren are doing? Mark often says, looking out the window with a hint of loneliness. David now has 4 children, and it seems he and Margaret are getting along well, but they're both busy. And opportunities to see the grandchildren are rare. They live far from us in the city center, making visits difficult to arrange. We hesitate to intrude, knowing they're busy, and it might be a bother. Sometimes David calls asking for financial help, understandable since raising 4 children must be costly. The oldest grandchild is starting school next year, isn't he? We need to buy a present. It would be nice if they could come over for a long holiday. I wonder if they're too busy. Every time a children's special airs on TV, we eagerly await the day we can see our grandchildren again. Then one day, we receive a call from David after a long time. Mom, it's been a while. How have you been? We're as usual. But how about you? Is everyone doing well? You should bring the grandchildren to visit sometime. Dad has been looking forward to it. Everyone's fine here, so don't worry about us. And we were thinking of bringing the kids over to visit soon. Really? Dad will be so happy to hear that. Mark is currently out in the backyard, working in the vegetable garden. Imagine how happy he'd be to know David and Margaret are bringing the grandchildren over. And there's something we'd like to ask you about the kids. What? Is it about money again? It must be tough with school expenses and all, I understand. Thanks, as always. We really appreciate it. But this time it's a bit different. Actually, we're planning to go on an overseas trip soon, and we were hoping you could look after the kids while we're away. Overseas? That's quite sudden. Oh, that's right, you two haven't had your honeymoon yet. Yeah, both Margaret and I have been so busy, we never found the time. But last week, Margaret won a pair of tickets for an overseas trip in a raffle. Oh, in that case, have a great time. So, when are you bringing the grandchildren? We'll all come over this Saturday, so please wait for us. The kids are looking forward to seeing Grandpa and Grandma. Is that so? Then I'll prepare some delicious food and wait. Even after hanging up, my excitement couldn't be contained. When Mark came back from the field and saw my face, he asked with a smile, "What's up? You seem like you've received some good news." Mark, who has always been by my side through happy and sad times, can instantly sense even my slightest emotions. I told him about David and Margaret coming over. Really? That's exciting. On the promised Saturday, David and Margaret arrived with their 4 grandchildren. As soon as their car stopped in the parking lot, I couldn't wait any longer and rushed out the front door. Mom, it's been a while. Glad to see you're doing well. David, getting out of the driver's seat, greeted me with his usual smile. As the grandchildren emerged from the back seat, they all started running around energetically. I smiled at the sight, thinking they must have been bored during the long drive, but then I noticed something off. Their clothes seemed a bit dirty. Faded with time, some were torn or frayed. Considering they have 4 children, I thought they might be financially strained. But Margaret, stepping out of the passenger side, was dressed beautifully. She was in modern, bright casual fashion with fancy accessories. The contrast between her and the grandchildren's attire was shocking. "Hello, Elizabeth." The strong scent of her perfume made me cover my nose involuntarily. Margaret, seemingly unaware of her overpowering smell, headed inside. "We'll leave the kids with you and head out right away." Back inside, the grandchildren were already running around, with Mark desperately trying to catch them. "Try to escape from Grandpa." "Dear, I understand you're happy, but please don't overdo it." Mark was already out of breath and patting his back. "I want to ride on Grandpa's back." As one grandchild climbed onto Mark's back, the others gathered around. "Elizabeth, thank you so much for willingly taking care of the children," Margaret said with her lively tone. "It's nothing. We were really looking forward to seeing the grandchildren." As I responded cheerfully, Margaret suddenly switched to a familiar tone and whispered in my ear, "That's good to hear. It's truly a pleasure to look after the grandchildren, isn't it?" Then, with a cunning smile, Margaret presented an unbelievable demand. "Since you get to see your adorable grandchildren, I'll be charging $500 per child." I couldn't understand what she was saying at first. "What did you just say?" "I said, since you're taking care of the grandchildren, I'm charging $500 per child." I was completely dumbfounded. It would make sense if Margaret was paying us to take care of the children, but the reverse was just outrageous. "You're joking, right?" Then Margaret stopped laughing and replied seriously, "I'm not joking. I'm entrusting strangers with my precious children. Naturally, you should pay a rental fee." "Strangers? A rental fee?" I felt not just anger but also sadness at Margaret's words. Mark, having gotten the children off his back, came towards us. "Margaret, that's an incredibly unreasonable thing to say. Taking care of children isn't easy." But Margaret, without any hint of guilt, coolly retorted, What was once common sense is now nonsense. For example, men without girlfriends pay for dates with women, right? It's the same idea. Mark and I exchanged looks of disbelief. Either way, what's wrong is wrong. If that's how you're going to be, we won't take care of the kids. Are you planning to neglect them? This is why the elderly are disliked these days. Saying this, Margaret grabbed David's arm, intending to leave. David, silent, just followed Margaret without a word. Wait! We're not done talking. Mark tried to stop them, but without turning back, Margaret said, "We have to go now, our flight is soon." Wait! Wait, Margaret! In a panic, I realized something and called out to Margaret. You left your luggage in the car, but what about the kids' clothes? Could you buy them? We didn't prepare any clothes for the kids. Margaret said this nonchalantly and got into the car. Make sure you send $2,000 in total, $500 for each of the 4 kids, to David by Monday. Saying this, David and Margaret drove off. What was Margaret thinking, not even preparing clothes for the children to wear? We can't let them stay in the same clothes, so we decided to go shopping at a mall far from our home. But I worried whether the 4 grandchildren would stay calm at home while we were gone. I'm worried about leaving them at home alone. I wish someone could go buy the kids' clothes for us. First, try to measure the grandchildren's sizes as best you can. I'll go buy them alone. That would be a great help. Just hang in there a little longer. Be quiet, okay? When Mark scolded them, another grandchild kicked at his leg. You bad kid! I'll show you. Seeing his sibling being scolded, they must have thought they were being attacked by a villain. I wondered how to make them understand we're not the enemy. We could only sigh. Are you sure you'll be okay alone? Call me immediately if anything happens. With that, Mark went off to town. The thought of me, an elderly person, looking after 4 energetic grandchildren alone wasn't without its anxieties. Just when I thought they were quietly playing games in the room, one would suddenly dash outside. When they returned covered in mud after ravaging the crops in the field, I was so frustrated I ended up laughing instead. There was only one set of pajamas David used to wear as a child, so I tried to rush them into the shower. But they resisted and tried to escape the bathroom. Do you take showers every day? Ever since the kids arrived, I had been concerned about a certain smell. Not just their ragged clothing, but a body odor filled the air with slight movement. Removing their clothes revealed them caked in dirt, as if they hadn't showered in days. Thinking of Margaret's stylish attire and strong perfume made me feel helpless. After much struggle, they finally showered, but then the other grandchildren were missing. Hearing the neighborhood dog barking loudly, I went outside fearing the worst and found the grandchildren throwing things at the dog. Stop that! It's not right! Don't you feel sorry for it? But it's really fun. Look, it's barking. I told you to stop. What you're doing is very wrong. Scolding them angrily made the children quiet down. Then they said something I hadn't anticipated. But Mom always does the same thing. We were just imitating her. I was completely exhausted. I wondered if we could really take care of them until David and Margaret returned, as my anxiety grew. Then, Mark returned, laden with bags of clothes for the grandchildren. Are you okay? You look pale, you must be tired. I'll take care of the grandchildren, Elizabeth. You should rest a bit. But I can't just leave it all to you. The children, having forgotten they were scolded, were energetically running around again. Watching them, Mark sighed and said, Should I take action? Yes, I think that would be best. Continuing as things are, our strength won't last, and more importantly, it's not good for the grandchildren's education. Because we love our grandchildren, we need to help them become decent people, so I agree with Mark's suggestion. Mark and I took the grandchildren to a boarding school deep in the mountains. It's been a while. We're in your care again. This time it's the grandchildren? They do remind me of David. In truth, when David went through a rebellious phase and refused to attend school, we had placed him in this boarding school. Unaware of the harsh life ahead, the children looked around curiously. On the first day, the grandchildren struggled to wake up past the designated time. Likely because they were used to staying up late playing games. They finally got out of bed when a staff member came to wake them. They hadn't ever tidied up their bedding themselves, so reluctantly, I showed them how at first. Do it like this. You've always seen Mom do it, right? One of the grandchildren shook their head. I've never seen Mom tidy up the bed. Really? So the bed stays like that? I was astounded but not surprised given Margaret's behavior. After waking, they were supposed to gather in the hall. But the grandchildren couldn't stay put and tried to wander off, quickly being brought back by staff. The breakfast was simple, to the grandchildren's dissatisfaction. There's no meat. It's too bland. I want instant noodles. That's not available here, Mark said, and the grandchildren sulkily clicked their tongues but eventually started eating in silence. After breakfast, they had to clean their rooms. Having never cleaned or tidied before, I taught them how to fold their clothes first. Go ahead, try it. The grandchildren attempted to fold their clothes, but initially, they couldn't do it well. However, after repeated tries, they got the hang of it and could fold nearly as well as we could. Dinner also had to be prepared by themselves. The grandchildren showed a sense of accomplishment with their first cooking experience. After dinner, there was a social gathering, and although they were exhausted from the unfamiliar hard work and dozed off at first, by the third day, they seemed to have gotten used to the work. If you treat others with consideration, good things will come back to you manifold. The children listened intently to the staff's words. Don't make the weak suffer or cause them pain. Don't be selfish and inconvenience others. If those around you are happy, it will come back around, making you happy too. By the time we left the boarding school, the grandchildren had stopped being so selfish. One of them, seeing me struggle with heavy luggage, stepped forward to help. I'll carry it. You rest, Grandma. Thus, the grandchildren's one-week boarding school program ended successfully. On the way home, I noticed many missed calls from David on my mobile phone. Margaret and he must be enjoying their trip abroad. Thinking this, I cheerfully called back, and it was Margaret on the line. What's going on? We've been waiting, but there's been no payment. Margaret was ranting irritably on the phone. There was poor reception at the boarding school, so we hadn't been in contact. I remembered Margaret demanding that we send $2,000 by Monday before they left for their trip. Why are you so upset? Is something wrong? Given her insistence on money before they left, it seemed they planned to enjoy their trip with our money from the start. Now that their plan fell through, David and Margaret appeared to be in trouble. Don't joke around. Make sure you transfer $2,000 today. Margaret's commanding tone irritated me. I couldn't help but wonder if that was the proper way to ask for something. I have no intention of giving you money, so enjoy your trip and don't forget souvenirs for the children. That's ridiculous. What you're doing is no different from theft. If you want to sue, go ahead. I doubt the police will bother with something like this, and you'll only embarrass yourself. Just so you know, Margaret, I have no intention of supporting you and David anymore. And I will ensure the inheritance goes directly to the grandchildren. We're the ones looking after the children. Supporting us is also for the children's sake. Wait a minute. What are you thinking, Mom? David, having snatched the phone from Margaret, spoke in a frantic tone. This is something Dad and I decided together. We're tired of financially supporting you. From now on, fend for yourselves. Responding to David's panic, I spoke in a calm, instructive tone. Don't be ridiculous. I can't believe you'd say something so cold. Margaret apparently took back the phone. Her condescending remarks resumed. You always said how much you love the grandchildren. Supporting us is also for their sake. You were happy when David was born, weren't you? Through the fertility treatments and the difficult birth, I've heard. Yet, you're willing to abandon David, your own child, after all that pain? Remember, supporting us is for the sake of your adorable grandchildren. Let me talk to her. Mark, who had been silently listening, took over the phone. You really have some nerve. Are you and David even parenting properly? Their clothes are tattered, and they hadn't been showered, had they? There was silence on the other end, with no comeback. I took the phone back from Mark and spoke my mind to Margaret. Children grow up watching their parents. Their bodies might grow on their own, but empathy for others must be taught. Come on, Mom. This isn't the time for such discussions. We really need money right now. Stop being childish, don't depend on us forever. As I scolded him over the phone, one of the grandchildren tugged at my sleeve. There's no need to pay. Even the young one could sense something was wrong with their parents' attitude, saying so with a resigned sigh. If the grandchildren are ever in trouble, I'll help. But I have no intention of supporting you two anymore. Be prepared for that. With that, I unilaterally ended the call. I gently stroked the head of the grandchild who looked up at me worriedly, and they smiled back. Although they said they'd be away for 2 weeks, David and Margaret returned earlier. They had relied on parental support and didn't plan ahead, ending up with almost no money left. They didn't even bring back souvenirs. Both looked utterly exhausted when they came to pick up the children. We never should have left the children with you. Margaret started complaining as soon as she entered. I guided David and Margaret to sit on the living room sofa. As I mentioned on the phone, are you really taking care of the children? Their clothes were torn, and they hadn't been bathed. This is clearly neglect. Neither David nor Margaret could find the words to respond. We handed over the grandchildren for the time being, but soon we heard rumors. The children were always seen in the same clothes, and neighbors complained about the smell. Sometimes, Child Protective Services visited David and Margaret's apartment. Eventually, the rumors of neglect reached the executives at David's company. In line with recent social awareness, the company called David in for a warning to prevent further issues. Afterward, we revised our will as we told David and Margaret, leaving 90% of the inheritance to the grandchildren and the rest to David and Margaret. The grandchildren, perhaps suited to the boarding school, have since become calmer. They visit us, politely greet us, and even volunteer to wash dishes after meals. Lately, they've been helping us with gardening, sharing everything from school stories to their dreams. Apparently, they don't trust their parents and have never consulted them about anything. Grandpa, Grandma, take us to the beach this summer break. The grandchildren asked with sparkling eyes, and I smiled back. Turns out, she's just cuter and more vulnerable than you, which makes me want to protect her. You know, men are drawn to protect women who appear weaker. My husband boasted, his face swollen with arrogance. This came after I'd stumbled upon his affair and confronted him, only to be met with a string of excuses and outright defiance. He sought my agreement, but there was no way I could nod along. Furthermore, He had no intention of leaving me or breaking things off with his mistress. Continuing a marriage with such a man was out of the question. So, I packed my bags, returned to my childhood home, and vented to my brother, Daniel. After hearing me out, Daniel broke into a broad smile. "Well, that's great news. What's great about it?" Hearing about my sister being cheated on, and his first reaction is "that's great?" I couldn't help but yell at him, but Daniel just kept smiling. And then, I noticed the fierce anger hidden behind his smile, an emotion that didn't quite match his expression. "My name is Arya, and I'm 31 years old. Anthony, my husband, was a colleague at the same company. Since joining, we'd consult each other on work, collaborate, and eventually became friends who could talk about anything. We'd often go out for drinks, discussing not just work but also personal matters, deepening our bond. After a company party a few months later, Anthony confessed his feelings for me as we were leaving. Attracted to his bright, sociable nature and his kindness, I didn't hesitate to accept his proposal, and we began dating. Our relationship flourished as we continued to share meals and consult each other on work. Both of us loved exploring new places, leading to trips on weekends and vacations abroad. Spending more time with Anthony, I found myself increasingly drawn to him, eventually realizing I wanted to be with him forever. That moment in our 5th year at the company, when Anthony surprised me with a proposal, remains unforgettable. In a private room of a glamorous restaurant, opening the ring box, I was so moved that tears wouldn't stop. I had no reason to refuse, so I immediately accepted the proposal. We both loved breathtaking views, especially the sea, where we had many memories, so we decided to have our wedding in a place overlooking the ocean. Blessed with good weather, it was the best day. I enjoyed my work and wanted to continue discussing it with Anthony even after getting married, but working in the same environment as a couple was difficult, so I ended up transferring to another branch, although my job didn't change much. 3 years into our marriage, we were still happily living together. We would dine out several times a month and travel a few times a year. Our relationship with Anthony's parents was good, and we were living a happy married life. To anyone looking in, we must have seemed like the perfect couple. Indeed, I felt that way too. But that feeling lasted only until this day. Since the next day was a holiday, we had planned to dine out late after work, as we usually did. However, when work was winding down, I received a message from Anthony. "Sorry, Arya. I got invited to dinner by a client tonight, and I can't say no since they've been really good to us recently. I won't be able to make it to our dinner." I felt lonely but said, "I see. Can't be helped. I was looking forward to trying that restaurant, so let's go another time." "Sure, I'll make it up to you. I'll probably be late tonight, so don't wait up. Bye." Anthony quickly ended the call. As I was about to leave work, my phone rang again. It was from my friend Camila. "Hello? Hey, Arya. Are you free tonight? Wanna grab a drink? It's been a while." Actually, that works out. Anthony is out to dinner with a client tonight. Camila is my best friend. We're colleagues at the same company, though now we work in different departments. She gave a speech at my wedding and sometimes comes over to our place. Since she and Anthony were also hired at the same time, we've hung out as a trio several times, being drinking buddies with Anthony. It's always more fun when the three of us get together. Sometimes, like today, she'd call out of the blue, and we'd meet up for a casual drink when available. We decided to meet at the station near my house, so I left the office and headed to the station. The train arrived just in time, and I got to the station quite early, but Camila was already there waiting. "Sorry to keep you. Long time no see. I just got here too." After exchanging a few words, we headed to a restaurant. There's a fairly large entertainment district on the way from the station to our house. And we entered a restaurant just off the main street of this area. We started with a toast with beer and then moved on to catching up, as usual. "How's it going recently? Anthony doing well?" "Yeah, he's fine. Just the usual, you know. Work has settled down for now, so it's not as busy or tiring. How about you, Camila? Were you working around here today? Exactly. This area falls under my jurisdiction, so I come here occasionally. On the contrary, I've been swamped with clients since the beginning of the month. I'm truly exhausted every day. At this rate, no man will come near me. Camila is the epitome of a career woman. Though attractive in face and figure, her blunt personality and strong will seem to keep men at bay. After sharing what's on our minds and feeling the mutual encouragement to keep pushing forward, we left the restaurant in the usual high spirits. This entertainment district has a really nice vibe. Mind if we take a slow walk back? To that, I replied. Sure, a walk to the station will help sober us up. And so, we decided to stroll through the bustling streets towards the station. As we walked, our conversation continued. Arya, you're lucky. You've got a good husband, and it seems like your married life is going well. Are you thinking about having kids anytime soon? Well, we don't really talk about it much. We both love our jobs, and I worry about how pregnancy might affect my work. We're thinking someday, but it's hard to find the right timing. While discussing this, a certain restaurant came into view. It was the place Anthony and I had planned to dine at tonight. The windows were absent, replaced by glass walls allowing a dim view into the elegant interior. The orange chandeliers inside, deliberately subdued, caught my eye. Just as I thought, I'd like to come here next time, I recognized a familiar figure. I stopped in my tracks. Arya, what's wrong? Unable to respond to Camila, my gaze was fixed on the restaurant. There was Anthony, seated across from an unfamiliar woman. She appeared slightly younger than me, dressed in revealing clothing. Anthony had said he was dining with a client tonight, but the woman across from him hardly seemed like a business associate. They were chatting and laughing together. Isn't that Anthony? What's going on? Camila seemed to have noticed Anthony inside as well. I was too shocked to know what to do. Seeing my state, Camila suggested. Arya, maybe you should confront him directly? Yeah, you're right. I took out my mobile phone from my bag and took a photo of Anthony and the unknown woman. As I began to calm down, anger started to bubble up. Upon reaching the station, Camila offered. Should I come with you to confront him? Having both of us there might make Anthony more likely to tell the truth. Thanks, but it's a family matter. I'll talk to him myself. I declined her offer and we parted ways. On my way home, I struggled to contain the growing anger. About an hour after I arrived home, Anthony returned. I'm home. Welcome back. How was dinner with the client? It was tough, you know. They wanted to go to a second place, and they drink a lot. But I think I made a good impression. Right after he finished speaking, I pointed my mobile phone at him, showing him the photo. This person is from your client? She looks quite young. Dressed not quite for work. Did she change before meeting you, Anthony? What? Why? You didn't follow me, did you? Of course not. I was dining out with Camila. We just happened to see this on our way back. Is this person really a client? Choosing such a fancy restaurant for dinner, from which company is she? Well, what? Can't answer? She's not someone you need to hide from me, right? Sorry. Sorry? You mean this is an affair? She's your mistress? Hey! Answer me. Yes. I broke down crying. Why? Why would you do this? I thought we were doing fine. It's your fault, Arya. You're always busy with work, and though you take care of home, I wanted you to pay more attention to me. You're straightforward and strong, but she's cute and makes me want to protect her. Eventually, I found it more enjoyable to be with her than with you. Hearing those words was a shock. No longer feeling any affection from him. Clearly preferring his affair partner. I would have preferred he just said it was a friends with benefits. I couldn't stay any longer, packed what I needed, and left the house. dragging my carry-on, I caught the last train home. The journey back home felt longer than usual. I don't remember what I was thinking. Maybe I was too hurt to think about anything. Next thing I knew, I was in front of my parents' house. I had a key but hadn't called ahead, so I rang the doorbell. Daniel, my brother, opened the entrance door. Daniel? Hey! Long time no see. What brings you here at this hour? Daniel is a workaholic. After graduating, he worked for a major company for 3 years before starting his own business. His sales have been growing steadily, and now he's the president of a company with dozens of employees. He hardly ever comes home, and he couldn't even attend my wedding due to an important business meeting. I knew Daniel got married a year ago from our parents, but since there was no wedding ceremony, I had only briefly greeted his wife, with whom I hadn't formed a close connection. It had been years since I last saw Daniel. Daniel, what about you? How are mom and dad? Haha. What about me? It's my parents' house too. I finally got a long vacation, so I thought I'd come back and do some filial piety. By the way, they're currently on a trip to Hawaii, using the travel vouchers I gave them. Never thought I'd be house-sitting. His cheerful demeanor hadn't changed. A bit too carefree, but he's the type to make bold moves. I could imagine his employees finding it a pleasant place to work. So, what brings you here at this time, Arya? I was taken aback by Daniel's presence, momentarily forgetting why I had come home. Sorry. I just had some trouble at home. I was hoping to stay here for a while. Ah, of course. It's not my house, but it's fine. Your room is available, so come on in. Once you're settled, I'll make some coffee and you can tell me all about it. I felt comforted by Daniel's warmth. After setting down my bags, I decided to take a shower to freshen up. I felt a bit better, but I couldn't calm down. Anger was bubbling up inside me. When I entered the living room, Daniel was watching TV. Refreshed? I'll make some coffee then. As Daniel turned off the TV and I sat down, I began to tell him about the day's events over coffee. How we had been getting along as a married couple. How we had planned to go out to dinner as usual. How he canceled because he said he was going out to dinner with a client. How I ended up drinking with Camila. And, showing the photo on my mobile phone to Daniel, I told him. On the way back from drinking, I saw Anthony and this woman at the restaurant we were supposed to go to. When I confronted him after he came home, he admitted to having an affair with her, saying she was cuter and made him want to protect her more than me. I told the story through tears. Daniel listened to me until the end, looking at my mobile phone. When I finished, he looked up and said something I never expected. I thought Daniel would comfort me, tell me to leave such a man, and be on my side. However, Daniel, with a wide smile, said, Arya, that's great. I slammed my hands on the table and stood up in disbelief. How is that great? I said, returning to my room. I couldn't understand why Daniel would say that, just thinking about it made me even angrier. I shouldn't have said anything. I regretted talking to Daniel as I lay down on the bed. I didn't want to return to the house where Anthony was, so I stayed at my parents' house. Daniel and I didn't talk much after that day. It was tough that I commute to work from my parents' house during the weekdays. It took twice as long as usual. I spent my time thinking about how hard it would be to file for divorce and demand compensation. A week later, on the weekend, I decided to relax in my room and play some mobile games, enjoying a leisurely time for the first time in a while. Just as I was thinking about getting some lunch, the doorbell rang. Who could that be? It was unusual to have visitors, so I went to the entrance. Then, there was Anthony. And he was apologizing to Daniel, who stood there imposingly. Why, though? Shouldn't he be apologizing to me, not Daniel? Then I heard Daniel's voice. I never imagined the other party would be you. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Anthony was still apologizing to Daniel. Layla's cuter and needs protection, huh? Layla? The only Layla I knew was Daniel's wife. Confused, Daniel continued. Lately, Layla's been acting restless and clearly hiding something from me. Her expressions when I talked to her weren't right, so I started suspecting an affair. I was considering hiring a detective, and right then, Arya came back home. I was shocked when Arya showed me a photo of your affair, and there was Layla in it. Sad but also surprised that it was a family member involved. You never know what's going to happen. This will make the divorce court and compensation claims easier, though. I was speechless. Turns out, Anthony's affair partner was Daniel's wife, Layla. The woman Anthony had been dining with wore heavy makeup, completely unrecognizable to me. It had been a while since I last saw her, and I didn't remember her wearing that much makeup. When you contacted me, I truly felt sorry for what I had done. I will cut off all contact with Layla, so please forgive me. Apparently, Daniel had reached out to Anthony about the affair. Daniel noticed me standing there, stunned. Oh, Arya. You heard the conversation? Yeah, most of it. Good. Now we have all the information we need on Anthony and Layla, his affair partner. This will make it easier to file for compensation in the divorce proceedings. It's good you came home, Arya. Daniel said to me with a smile. So that's what it was. At that moment, I understood the meaning behind Daniel's words from a week ago. Why he had said that's great. What was Daniel feeling at that time? He was trying to comfort me, but maybe he was also speaking to himself. Thinking about Daniel's feelings, I decided to divorce Anthony and claim compensation in the divorce proceedings. Arya. It's my fault. Please forgive me. I can't pay the compensation if you demand it in the divorce proceedings. I ignored Anthony's plea for help. I'll contact you later with the details. Be prepared. Daniel then kicked Anthony out of the house. Afterward, Daniel told Layla about the divorce and filed for compensation. Layla initially resisted but seemed to accept the demands after discussing Anthony. I also demanded a divorce and compensation from Anthony. After being clearly told by Daniel, Anthony complied without resistance. When the divorce was finalized, I received a call. It was from Anthony's mother. Expecting a scolding, I hesitantly answered, but heard an apology instead. She was sincerely sorry for his actions. It seemed Anthony blamed Layla for the divorce, and Layla blamed Anthony, leading to their breakup. His parents apologized repeatedly for their son's inadequacies and said they had disowned him. Hearing this from them, I felt a sense of relief. Anthony was now disowned by his parents, with no one to turn to, left alone. I decided to start anew. Every month, the compensation from Anthony was deposited, but one day, he showed up at my parents' house, asking to reduce the compensation. Please, can you reduce the compensation? No way. Do you understand how I felt being cheated on? There's no reducing the compensation unless my feelings are healed. Leave. I turned him away. Yet, he kept coming back, week after week, asking for a reduction. The compensation won't change no matter how many times you come. If you keep this up, I'll call the police. I responded calmly. But Anthony apparently didn't believe I would actually call the police. His demands eventually shifted from reducing the compensation to stopping payments entirely, even suggesting a condescending offer of reconciliation. When I started calling the police right in front of him, Anthony changed his demeanor and fled from the house. The police advised me not to open the door anymore and to install a monitor-equipped doorbell to use if I recognized him. Fearing the police, Anthony resorted to sending lengthy text messages and making phone calls. After changing my email and phone number, things finally quieted down. However, Anthony tried to visit the branch where I worked without any business, and even enlisted colleagues to try to contact me, becoming a nuisance at both the main and branch offices. Once, I received a message from Camila. Working close to Anthony's department at the headquarters, Camila had been keeping a close eye on Anthony's current situation. Anthony, having begged a colleague to reach out to me, had his divorce exposed, and his harassment became known due to being spotted near my house during his commute. Realizing no one was on his side, feeling uncomfortable under their gazes and attitudes, he voluntarily resigned from the company. Despite his job search efforts, he struggled to find employment. And, unfortunately, joined a company involved in illegal activities. Desperate, he pleaded with the HR department to rehire him. Having abandoned all his responsibilities for his own convenience, there was no place for Anthony upon his attempted return. He was swiftly turned down, and Anthony, lacking the courage to resign a second time, endured a harsh life of commuting with the first train and working unpaid overtime until the last train. On the other hand, Layla had reached out several times, wondering if there was any chance to reconcile. However, Daniel recognized there was no love left. Like Anthony, Layla had quit her job upon the scandal becoming known, hoping to escape the situation. Sometime after the divorce, fearing poverty, Layla pleaded with Daniel, unable to pay the divorce settlement, and asked for a chance to start over. Daniel, seeing her focus solely on money, realized her true intentions. Refusing to reconcile or reduce the settlement, Layla claimed she couldn't pay because she had no money, failing to contribute a cent. Daniel, undeterred, contacted her parents. They were unaware of the divorce. They hurriedly apologized and paid on her behalf. Layla thought this settled everything, but her parents, having only covered the costs temporarily, demanded repayment and were furious. Now, Layla works under strict conditions at her parents' farm, which they manage. Since then, Daniel and I have been in touch more frequently, sharing updates, how we've been, and the freshness of reconnecting after a long time brings a sense of family appreciation. Daniel continues to lead a busy life with work but seems to enjoy his days. It took me a while to recover. The shock of the affair and the loss of my married life brought stress. But support from family, bosses, seniors, and friends helped me view the experience positively. Now, without considering marriage, I'm enjoying my single life. Please, help me! The voice of Mia on the phone was so frantic that I had never heard. She was supposed to be on a plane to Hawaii with Ethan by now. Was there some kind of trouble? I braced myself. Our house! Our house! What? Our house? Mia wasn't on the plane. Learning the truth, I resolved to send Ethan, who had been missing, to hell. I'm Lily, a 32-year-old corporate employee at a major trading company. My husband Ethan is a year younger than me, and we got married 3 years ago. He works for a big corporation too, and is quite handsome by any standard. I didn't choose him for his looks or salary, but he's been nothing short of perfect as a spouse. I've been happy we married early. Our marriage was smooth sailing, but then, out of nowhere, Ethan quit his job recently. According to him, he couldn't give up his dream of becoming a writer and needed to submit lots of manuscripts for competitions to debut. I told him, "You can write after work on weekdays or on weekends." But my words fell on deaf ears. Instead of focusing on his health after quitting, he's been mostly sleeping at home, almost like he's unemployed. Hey, if you're going to be at home, at least do some housework. If I do the housework, I'll have no time to write my manuscript. You're just sleeping all day anyway. I was fed up with this repetitive argument. Not working, not doing house chores, just sleeping. My patience with Ethan was wearing thin, and I started considering divorce. But thinking about my good income, Ethan's remaining savings, and most of all, Mia, Ethan's mother, who was overjoyed about our marriage, made it hard to take that step. Mia raised Ethan alone and dotes on him as he has no siblings. She was thrilled about our marriage, treating me like her own daughter. However, since Ethan quit his job, Mia started to act awkwardly around me. She often didn't respond to my messages. It was clear she was avoiding me, and I couldn't figure out why. When I asked Ethan, he just said it would be best to leave her alone, not taking it seriously. Gradually, I too started to dread contacting her, deciding to just observe as he suggested. At least do the house chores if you're not working. I'm doing all the work and house chores, while you just sleep all day. That day, my anger finally erupted. Ethan was talking about a deadline for some competition, but he wasn't acting like it. He complained about me being slow to prepare lunch while I was working remotely. I couldn't stay silent after that. It turned into a fierce argument. "You're always working too, never make a decent meal. What, should I just not eat? Your lazy behavior without working is only possible because I'm out there earning our living expenses, right? Your savings hardly make a dent in our costs." Being called out for not working and being supported by me, Ethan's face turned red with embarrassment and he started shaking. I thought if he got violent, I'd leave the house right away, but thankfully, that worst-case scenario was avoided. Without saying a word, Ethan stormed out of the house. Watching him leave in his casual clothes, with just his mobile phone and wallet, making deliberately loud footsteps, I felt like I was looking at a petulant child. The only place he could go in that getup would be his parents' house. I thought of warning Mia in advance about Ethan possibly causing trouble, but, as usual, she didn't answer her phone. He sneaked back home later that night, but from that day on, our conversations dwindled, and he started avoiding me, going out more frequently. For an unemployed Ethan, his destinations were limited, usually his parents' house, and sometimes I'd find receipts from internet cafes. I tried to initiate conversations several times, but each time, he would escape to his room or just leave the house. I gave up on repairing our relationship and started preparing for a divorce. I thought it best to inform Mia about the divorce. I sent texts and made calls, but got no response. Even when I asked Ethan that something might have happened to her, he just said she was fine. Considering how often he visited his parents' house, I believed him, but I started doubting his whereabouts. I could just ask Mia how often he visits her, but I couldn't get in touch with her. I thought about investigating his whereabouts myself, but with work and household chores, I didn't have the time or energy. Returning home after a late-night overtime shift, I found him fiddling with something in front of the closet. "What are you doing up so late?" Welcome back. Actually, I'm planning to take Mom to Hawaii tomorrow, just packing for the trip." "Tomorrow? That's quite sudden." Unconcerned by my surprise, he happily packed the luggage. I knew Mia always wanted to go on a trip. After Ethan's father passed away when Ethan was young, Mia devoted herself to working and raising him alone. She rarely even went to the department store, let alone on trips. I remember her saying that with a wistful smile. "This month, Mom turns 60, so I thought I'd fulfill her long-standing dream." "Mia's turning 60 already." "Yeah, that's why I've been working part-time lately, saving up money for this. But there's a bit of a problem." He looked up at me. "I've got enough for Mom's part of the trip, but I'm short for my half. I've been saving, but it's not enough. So, I was wondering, Lily, could you help out a bit? Is that okay?" He looked at me with a pleading expression, radiating charm as if refusing him would be unthinkable. "So, you're saying I should pay for your part?" Startled by my unexpectedly cold tone, he hastily shook his head. No. Just lend me the money. I'll pay it back after the trip." "And you're not going to fail to pay me back because you can't find a job, right?" I glared at him, and he looked suspiciously guilty. I was astounded by his audacity. "I won't do that. Trust me, I can even write a commitment form if you want." "All right, let's do that." I pulled a piece of paper and a pen towards me. "After the trip, you'll get a full-time job and start paying it back. No part-time jobs, understood?" He grudgingly agreed, though he seemed reluctant. "And if you can't pay back, we'll divorce. We'll settle it in court with a third party." "Divorce?" He looked visibly unsettled. Maybe the reality of divorce hit him hard. Still, when I insisted I wouldn't lend him the money unless he agreed to these terms, he reluctantly accepted. I wrote down the conditions and the amount, and had Ethan sign it. "Make sure you pay it back." I know. I made a copy of the agreement and handed it to Ethan. It might be a good idea to show it to Mia if I get a chance. Feeling exhausted, I left him by the closet and went to bed. I intended to see him off, but he must have left early. When I woke up to go to work, he and his luggage were already gone. Thanks to yesterday's overtime, my workload today was light. I could finish my work in the morning and take a half day off. I planned to enjoy life without Ethan to the fullest. After finishing my work in the morning, I was having lunch, wondering if he and Mia were on the plane by now, when my phone started ringing loudly. Thinking it might be a work call, I answered without checking the caller. "Ah, good, you picked up." It was Mia's voice, desperate and strained, not at all like someone in the middle of a luxurious Hawaiian vacation. "Mia, what's wrong? The trip? Have you already arrived in Hawaii?" "Hawaii? Trip? I don't know what you're talking about. Please, come over. The house, our house, it's about to burn down." Mia's plea was almost a scream. In the background, I could hear the sound of fire trucks and orders being shouted. Though I puzzled, I quickly agreed to come and hurriedly finished my lunch and headed to her house. When I arrived, the smell of smoke filled the street, and flames leaped high into the sky. "Mia!" I rushed towards Mia, who seemed on the verge of collapsing in front of her burning house. She looked up at me with a pale, distant face and murmured faintly, "This house is done for." Led by Mia's gaze, I looked up at her house, burning and crumbling before us. It spread from the house next door. The wind was strong, and the fire spread quickly, they said. We didn't even have anything flammable. Numerous fire trucks were on the scene, fighting fiercely against the flames, but her house was engulfed, showing no signs of being saved soon. The wind was strong, occasionally sending sparks flying our way. "It's dangerous here, why don't we go to my place for now? You won't be able to enter the house even after the fire dies down." Mia looked at me, hesitating, her face showing a reluctance to be involved with me. "I somehow understand you've been avoiding me. But we can't just stand here forever." After my words, she finally agreed to move. We hurried towards my home. "By the way, what was that about a Hawaii trip? I thought you were off to Hawaii with Ethan today." "Ethan said that?" "Yes. He said it was to celebrate your 60th birthday. I haven't heard a word about it." We were both confused by our completely mismatched stories. It was a misunderstanding arranged by Ethan. "Ethan told me that you were pushing all the housework onto him and going out with other men. He even said you were trying to borrow money from me, and I should avoid contacting you." "That's all lies. When the fire spread to the house, I couldn't reach Ethan by phone. I thought you might know where he is. I never imagined he'd be on a Hawaii trip." I couldn't fathom why Ethan would lie to keep me and Mia apart. But for Ethan, keeping us disconnected probably served his purposes. "Mia, it's all a misunderstanding. Ethan quit his job to become a writer, but he never writes. He doesn't do housework and just sleeps all day." "Oh, so we've been deceived by him." Perhaps she has been harbored doubts about Ethan. She readily accepted my words. If Ethan hadn't gone to Hawaii with Mia, had he taken the money for two and gone alone? Or maybe with someone else? Anyway, nothing could be done until he returned from his trip. I'll confront him thoroughly when he gets back. That night, Mia and I spent a long time talking, catching up on everything we'd missed. The firefighters had informed us that it was inevitable that the house burned down, so she agreed to stay at my place until she found a new home. The more we talked, the more Ethan's web of lies unraveled. It was unbelievable how he had badmouthed me, even though I was handling both work and all the housework. Mia kept apologizing to me. But it wasn't her fault, it was Ethan's. We waited for Ethan to return. "What's this all about?" For days later, Ethan, oblivious to everything, cheerfully returned home, only to be dragged by Mia and me to the remains of Mia's house. Ethan was speechless in front of the burnt-out house. "Ethan, you lied to Mia and me, and leisurely went on a Hawaii trip while everything burned down." "Lies? What are you talking about?" He was visibly shaken and unsettled. Before I could say anything, Mia stepped forward. "Ethan, aren't you ashamed? Lying to Lily to get money. Who did you go on the trip with?" Her anger was fierce, and I involuntarily stepped back. At first, Ethan tried to retort, but the glares from both Mia and me left him speechless. Wouldn't it be better to just admit it? If we go to court like the commitment form says, you'll lose immediately. I haven't said I won't pay it back yet. You never intended to, right? I know about your real job, Ethan. He glared at me, trying to hide his panic. What are you talking about? Rent a boyfriend. Did you enjoy your trip with your client? If your company finds out, you'll be fired for violating the rules. At my accusation, he gasped. Mia had told me about his secret job the night she stayed at my place. She didn't know what he did, but she mentioned he often came to her house with envelopes bearing a store's logo. Relying on her memories, I found a Rent-A-Boyfriend website. Though his mouth was covered with a heart stamp in the pictures, it was clearly Ethan, and he seemed to be quite popular in sales. I admit I've been working, but the trip was different. As he tried to resist, I showed him the screen of my mobile phone. He looked at the image and stood there, stunned. That dumb woman. It was a disaster that you went on a trip with her. On the screen was a photo of Ethan lying on a Hawaiian beach, smiling next to an unfamiliar woman. The date was from 2 days ago. The woman, mistaking Ethan as her real boyfriend, had probably uploaded the photo to social media. Apparently having no idea about the photo, he hung his head in defeat. With evidence laid bare, there was no escape for him. Ethan, trembling, fell to his knees. Please forgive me. I looked at Ethan's apology with a cold gaze. Mia, too, looked at his disgrace with a chilly stare. Sorry, but I have no intention of forgiving you. I brushed off Ethan as he begged for forgiveness, insisting that he was sorry. I turned to Mia, who continued to glare at Ethan with anger in her eyes. Ethan had been working secretly as a rent-a-boyfriend, and most of his earnings were lost to gambling. I confronted Ethan about his secret purchases of lottery tickets after he promised to work harder, and I decided to file for divorce. We agreed that he would pay back the borrowed travel money with interest. Mia, realizing his earnings as a rent-a-boyfriend, demanded he contribute to the rebuilding of her house. Though the fire had started from the neighboring house, its rapid spread was partly due to Ethan's actions. Apparently, he kept all the things he couldn't bring to our house in his room at Mia's house. This included stylish clothes for his rent-a-boyfriend job, scented candles, and trinkets that women like. His room was so filled that Mia had warned him several times, but he angrily refused to let her in, almost becoming violent. She tried to avoid his room as much as possible. Before leaving for his trip, he had rummaged through his room to get ready, leaving the dusty window open. He forgot to close it, and after the fire started, sparks flew into the room on the wind, quickly engulfing it. If he had closed the window or kept his room tidy, the fire might not have spread so badly. Although the neighboring house was primarily to blame for the fire, Mia, fueled by her anger at being deceived, demanded that he should compensate her at least partially. Ethan, intimidated by Mia and my collection efforts, apparently had been making quite a lot as a rent-a-boyfriend. He bragged about being able to pay off the debt easily, but he was fired from his job and faced a lawsuit for damages. At his rent-a-boyfriend agency, it was forbidden to go on overnight trips with clients. Meeting them without the company's knowledge and posting about dates on social media were also against the rules. He broke all these rules, leading to his dismissal. A client who had chosen him became furious after seeing the social media post from the woman he went to Hawaii with. This led to a loss of regular clients, and the company sued him for damages. Having once earned a high income as a rent-a-boyfriend, he was disillusioned with normal job salaries and struggled to find employment. However, he was eventually forced to use his savings and take part-time jobs to pay off his debts to various parties. Mia decided to live with me until her house was rebuilt. She took over the household chores, freeing me up from my busy work schedule. On weekends, we enjoyed movies together. Once my major project at work is completed, I plan to take a long vacation and fulfill her wish to go on a trip. Although I divorced Ethan, Mia and I found we had a lot in common and would like to maintain our good relationship. You know, I remarried a beautiful and young woman unlike you. My ex-husband Duke said to me with a vulgar smile. It's only been a week since our divorce, and he's already remarried. He probably was cheating on me even while we were married. For a while after we got married, Duke and I were a happy couple. We both loved kids and were conscious about having them right from the start of our marriage. I can't wait to have kids. I want a daughter and a son, Duke would say excitedly, imagining our future. But we struggled to conceive. Gradually, our relationship soured, and we ended up hating each other and divorced. A week later, I ran into him at a shopping mall, where I went to distract myself. My name is Lynn. A woman in her 30s and a corporate employee. I met Duke, who's 4 years older than me, through friends. And got married 3 years ago. Duke and I both loved kids and wanted to start a family early. I really hope we have kids soon. I'd like a daughter and a son, Duke used to say. Yeah, I don't mind the gender as long as they're healthy. But I do want more than 2, I would respond. We happily talked about what our kids might look like, what their personalities would be like, eagerly awaiting their arrival. However, even after 1 year, then 2, we couldn't conceive. During the first year, Duke said, "It didn't work out again. But no rush, we'll be fine." But after the second year, he started to become bitter. What, it didn't work out again? Someone I know had a baby just 2 months after getting married. Why can't we have one? He complained. I don't know what to say. Our relationship deteriorated from that point. Duke's behavior became harsher, and I couldn't handle it alone anymore. I often confided in my best friend Johanna. Johanna always listened seriously to my problems. I see. Duke really wants a child, so I understand his disappointment. But he should be more considerate of you, she said sympathetically. I know. He's changed so much. He used to be so kind, I said, reminiscing about the old Duke and sighing deeply. Johanna and I shared our deepest troubles with each other, things we couldn't tell anyone else. Time passed, and we still couldn't have children. Before we knew it, 3 years of marriage had gone by. Realizing that natural conception might be impossible, I decided to suggest fertility treatments to Duke. After dinner and while drinking coffee, I approached Duke. Hey, Duke. We haven't had a child in 3 years, right? I'm 34 now, so maybe it's time to consider fertility treatments? Duke's face showed blatant annoyance at my words. Fertility treatments? Isn't it because you're getting old and decrepit that we can't have kids? If you're gonna do it alone. That's not something you can just say. I was taken aback by his harsh response and was at a loss for words. I'm not doing it. There's no way the problem is with me. Duke spat out those words and immediately left for the bedroom. Left alone, I stood there stunned. Does Duke not want to cooperate at all? I muttered, filled with a mix of emptiness and sadness. With no other choice, I decided to visit a fertility clinic alone. After a thorough examination. Where's your husband? It's important to have his cooperation. Infertility issues are often on the male side. Make sure he comes with you next time, the doctor asked. Encouraged by the doctor's words, I tried to discuss fertility treatments with Duke again that night. Fertility treatments won't work if it's just me. You need to get tested too. Can you please come to the hospital with me? Are you saying it's my fault? It's obviously you, the woman, who's the problem. I have nothing to do with it. I told you to do it alone if you're going to do it. Don't drag me into this. Duke exploded in anger. But infertility often lies on the male side. If the doctor said so, it must be true. The doctor also said that the husband needs to cooperate. Please, Duke, come to the hospital with me. I tried desperately to persuade Duke. Despite his irritation. Fine, I'll go. Just stop nagging. Duke eventually agreed, albeit grudgingly. A few days later, I took Duke to the fertility clinic. After his examination, Duke emerged from the testing room looking irritated, his face twisted in frustration. We were waiting in the reception area to hear both my previous results and Duke's recent test. Due to the clinic's busy schedule, we were not called for a while. Being impatient, Duke abruptly stood up and said, "I'm leaving." He ignored my attempts to stop him and left alone. I had no choice but to hear the results alone. Finally called in, the doctor's revelation left me in shock. "I need to tell Duke." I rushed home, opened the door, and said, "I'm back." I washed my hands and headed to the living room, where an infuriated Duke awaited. "What's wrong?" "Hey! What are you playing at? I thought infertility testing would be simpler, but why did I have to go through that? It was humiliating." It seemed Duke was upset about the nature of the male fertility test. "Well, we need to do proper tests to find out why we can't have kids. About the test results." Duke cut me off mid-sentence, shouting angrily, "This is all because you're old and can't have kids. I can't take this anymore. I'm divorcing you." "What are you talking about all of a sudden?" I was shocked by Duke's sudden declaration of divorce and raised my voice in surprise. "I can't live with an infertile old woman anymore." Fed up with Duke's abusive language and constant belittling about my infertility, I felt my feelings for him cooled in that moment. "Fine. Let's divorce." "Ha, I'm glad you agree so easily. Get out, you infertile old woman." I silently packed my things and left the house. I decided to stay at my parents' house for a while. They welcomed me warmly, which I was very grateful for. I filled out my part of the divorce papers as soon as I got there and sent them to Duke. We had been married for 3 years. Duke was a kind and good husband in the beginning. There were many happy memories. But the Duke I loved was no longer there. Remembering the ugly face of Duke, who insulted and pushed for divorce, filled me with sadness and intense anger. I didn't have any love left for Duke. A week later, I went to a large shopping mall for a change of scenery. That's when I saw a familiar profile. Ugh. And I involuntarily muttered. I tried to leave unnoticed, but Duke saw me. "Isn't that Lynn?" Duke noticed me and called out. I ignored him and started walking away. "Wait." He grabbed my arm. "Let go." Duke looked at me with a vile smile. "Following me? Can't forget about me, huh?" "What?" His off-base comment left me dumbfounded. I've remarried a beautiful, young woman. I have no need for an infertile old woman, so disappear. Duke laughed rudely, looking down on me. The fact that he stopped me just to tell me to disappear infuriated me. It had only been a week since our divorce, but he was already remarried. I realized then that Duke must have been cheating on me. The deterioration of our marriage wasn't just because we couldn't have kids, it was also because of Duke's affair. He must have been confident about divorcing because he had the option of remarrying his mistress. What a terrible man. As I frowned, a coquettish voice caught my attention. "Duke, who are you talking to?" The voice belonged to a woman with blonde hair, heavy makeup, and revealing clothes. She was also adorned with designer bags and accessories and held shopping bags from brand stores. "Finished shopping? This is my ex-wife. The infamous ex-wife." The woman looked down on me with a scornful gaze. I recognized her from somewhere. Who was she? I was on the verge of remembering, when Duke triumphantly introduced her. "Lynn, let me introduce you. This is my wife, Pamela. Beautiful and young, right? Hi, I'm Pamela, Duke's new wife. 25 years old." At that moment, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. So, it was that Pamela. Finally remembering, I couldn't stop the laughter that welled up inside me. Seeing me laughing uproariously, Pamela and Duke looked at me with puzzled expressions. Still laughing, I told Duke, "I feel sorry for you. I'm busy, so I'm going now, lol." Duke hurriedly tried to stop me as I was about to leave. Hey! What do you mean you feel sorry for me? Is that your way of admitting defeat? Admitting defeat? No way. Then what is it? Spit it out. Duke asked irritably. All right, I'll tell you. I turned to Pamela. I know who you are. I said. What? I don't know a dull, uninteresting, old woman like you. Pamela retorted, looking puzzled. What a rude thing to say. I asked Pamela coldly. Do you know a woman named Johanna? Johanna? Ah. It seemed she remembered. Pamela's face turned pale. Johanna? Isn't she Lynn's best friend? What does Pamela have to do with Johanna? Duke asked anxiously. I declared. She's the bar employee who tricked Johanna's boyfriend into spending money on her. And she dumped him the moment he ran out of money. What? Duke's eyes widened in disbelief. I heard from Johanna that her boyfriend had been deceived and spent money on a bar employee named Pamela. Despite the bar explaining it was just part of the job, he believed they were truly in love and bought her expensive bags and designer watches. Johanna decided she didn't need a man who could be deceived by a bar employee. She had shown me a photo of this woman, Pamela. Johanna's naive boyfriend believed Pamela's seductive words, but Pamela went as far as having physical relationships outside the bar and even checking houses to live after they were married. And there were multiple men she did this to. It wasn't just Johanna's boyfriend. You seem to have manipulated several men, a trade company executive, a small construction company's CEO, and a county administrator, right? But when they started holding back on spending, you cut ties with them. Duke, aren't you being deceived too? Are you sure you're okay? That's a lie. There's no way that's true. You're just making up lies because you're bitter, aren't you? Stop kidding around. Duke was furious, refusing to listen to my warning. Exactly. I would never do such a thing. I don't even know who Johanna is, and I've never made her boyfriend spend money on me. Everything you're saying is a lie. You're just jealous because I'm beautiful, right? Pamela confidently lied and shouted back at me. That's right. Lynn is just jealous of Pamela and making up stories, right? Infertile old hag you are, so ugly. Infertile old hag, that's funny. You're truly pathetic. Go away, you old woman. Taking advantage of my silence, Pamela and Duke unleashed a barrage of insults at me. Finding the situation ridiculous, I said, You don't have to believe me. I truly don't care about Duke anymore. Anyway, I wish you happiness. And left the scene. From behind me. It's all lies, right? Pamela, you're not deceiving me, are you? Followed by Pamela's voice. Of course, it's a lie. Believe in me. Everything that old woman said was a lie. I heard. A few days later, I met Johanna and told her about the incident. Pamela remarried Duke. I was shocked when I heard you divorced Duke, but I never imagined he would marry that woman. Johanna was visibly surprised, her eyes and mouth wide open. Yes, it's true. It's a small world, isn't it? Indeed. But Duke, he's going to suffer. Knowing how Duke had treated me, Johanna smiled as if feeling relieved. I think Duke will end up in a miserable situation. Right now, he's completely infatuated with her. We laughed together. Sometime later, after work, I was about to head home as usual. Suddenly, Lynn. I heard a listless voice from behind. I was startled and turned around to see Duke standing there. What do you want? Don't scare me like that. What are you doing here? Lend me some money. What? Duke looked much thinner than before, almost haggard, with sunken cheeks and eyes. His wrinkled clothes made him appear pitiful. I could guess the situation from his appearance and request. So, you're exhausted in every way because of that Pamela. Exactly. Just like you said. She just milked me for all I had, and the moment my savings ran out, she left me, and filed for divorce. Just as I had warned, Pamela had married Duke for his money and left him as soon as it ran out. Foolish. I warned you politely, didn't I? I should have listened carefully to what you said. You know how much I spent on her? She's the worst. Don't you think I'm a victim? I was deceived. I'm the victim here. What? His claim of being a victim was astonishing. It was all his responsibility. Because she stripped me of everything, I can't even pay this month's rent, let alone the utilities. I'm sorry to ask, but can you lend me some money for my living expenses? If this continues, I'll become homeless. Duke's blatant opportunism left me utterly dismayed. Actually, I want to get back together with you, Lynn. Please reconcile with me. I realized your worth after being deceived by Pamela. Marry me again. It's a lifetime request. Marry me again. Duke begged tearfully. I looked at him coldly. Sorry, but I refuse. What? Why? Why? Have you forgotten how you treated me? I don't like you at all anymore. I hate you so much I don't even want to see your face. There's no chance of us getting back together. Duke turned red with rage. How dare you talk to me like that? I'm offering to reconcile with you, an infertile woman. Be grateful. Hearing Duke's words, I laughed. Why are you laughing? I just thought how mistaken you are, LOL. Mistaken? Duke asked, puzzled. The infertility issue wasn't with me, it was with you, Duke. What? Duke was speechless. You left the hospital without hearing the test results. I was going to tell you that night, but you started talking about divorce and never listened. The results showed you have almost no fertility, and natural conception is almost impossible. I, on the other hand, had no issues. That's a lie! It can't be true! There's no way I'm the cause of infertility! It's definitely you! Duke ranted, refusing to believe. I've never been sick, so how can I be infertile? It must be you! If you think it's a lie, go to the hospital and hear it yourself. I replied calmly. Is it true? No, it can't be. I can't be infertile. Duke was in total disarray, sweating profusely. He never thought the issue was with him. So, go and hear it directly from the doctor. If you plan to marry someone else in the future, it's better to know about your body. I said and left. Duke went to the clinic and learned the truth about his infertility. He called me several times, but I ignored them all. He then left voicemails. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Let's start over. Answer the phone. Please. I have no money. I'm in deep debt. Help me, Lynn. I deleted all his messages and blocked his phone number. A few days after blocking him, I was ambushed by Duke in front of my office. Lynn, please. Even if we don't reconcile, just lend me some money. I'm not asking for much, just $10,000. No, even $5,000 will do. Please. We were married once, right? Duke pleaded with deep apologies. Stop this right here. I'm not lending you any money. Go back right now, or I'll call the police. Even as I warned him, Duke persisted. Just lend me the money. So, I really called the police to deal with him. Perhaps the shock of the police being called or the fear of increased patrols deterred him. After that, he never showed up in front of me again. Duke, struggling financially and accumulating more debt, moved to a very old apartment and worked part-time at a grocery store late into the night to make ends meet. However, the strain took its toll, and he started making mistakes continuously at work. Unable to handle his main job while doing a side job, he was looked down upon and felt quite uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I've almost completely moved on from the shock of the divorce and am working energetically every day. I had relied quite a bit on my parents, but now I've moved to an apartment near my company and am enjoying living alone without any concerns. Recently, Johanna and I went on a long-planned trip where I met a man and started dating him. It was a long-distance relationship, but last month he got transferred to a branch near my home. He asked me, "Would you like to get married?" So, it looks like I'm going to be quite busy from now on.
You? An unemployed housewife with no parents threatening me? Ha ha ha! Not scary at all. Indeed. Trash like you is just trash, and you can't do anything. I see. I understand Liz and the others' feelings. I'll leave this house. With this, you'll be homeless. Haha. Do your best, homeless lady. That's right. It's a perfect opportunity for John to leave too. Definitely. Let's get rid of everything and make it clean. And the two of them went to John's room and told him to pack his things. Originally, I was planning to leave, but I never expected to be kicked out along with John. My name is Noah, a 27-year-old housewife. I recently married a man named Mark. Mark is 30, 3 years older than me, and at first, he seemed mature and composed, like an older person. He often talked about Liz, mother-in-law, so I thought he must be a good, family-oriented person. But it was only after getting married that I discovered Mark's true nature. During the family meeting, Liz was also very kind, and I thought I could have a happy married life. When we got married, he asked me to live with Liz. A few years ago, father-in-law passed away, and he wanted to be with Liz. I trusted Liz, so I agreed to live together. However, as soon as we got married, both Liz and Mark changed drastically. "Hey Noah, hurry up and bring me coffee, and clean the shower and toilet quickly." Liz would shout orders like that. She would call me loudly to do household chores, trying to intimidate me. What surprised me the most was the existence of an unannounced roommate. The day after we started living together, I woke up in the morning and was shocked to find an unfamiliar man opening the fridge in the kitchen. "Who is this?" I thought, and I froze as the man noticed me. "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Mark's younger brother, John." He introduced himself. I was not only surprised by the presence of a roommate, but also by the fact that Mark had a brother, which I hadn't been told about. John is currently 27, the same age as me. He apparently had been living with his parents all this time. I hurriedly went to Liz and asked about John. "Oh, John, that kid. You don't need to worry about him. He's just a shut-in ghost." "Huh?" I was shocked. Is that how she talks about her own son? A ghost? He's your son, right? "I only need Mark. John is just a worthless shut-in. He goes out only when it's time for shopping and then locks himself in the house, which is really creepy." How cruel. I felt disgust. I was thoroughly disappointed in Liz. It was surprising how their behavior changed immediately after getting married, but it's unfortunate to discriminate between one's own sons like that. I am an only child, so I never had siblings to compare to. But if I were told such things or treated with discriminatory attitudes by my own mom, it would be shocking. My parents are already deceased, so I envy the fact that they can still be together. So I at least want them to get along as a family. When I returned from work, I asked Mark about John. I thought maybe if they were siblings, they would get along. However, Mark's response was also cold. "Oh, John, huh? You can just leave him alone. He's fine being treated like air. He won't harm you anyway." He just said it with a dismissive tone. I was disillusioned by his attitude, which made it seem like he had just forgotten to mention it. Treating his brother like air? What a terrible way to put it. Mark was not a family-oriented person at all. He was just a mama's boy. Regretting this marriage, I finished today's housework and went upstairs. There, I happened to have a conversation with John, who was just going to the bathroom. "You married Mark, didn't you?" John said that. What do you mean by married?" "Oh, I'm sorry. It's nothing, but I won't say anything bad, so it's better to leave soon. Huh? Even if you end up with a divorce, you should get divorced. I was a bit annoyed by such a sudden statement. Certainly I was surprised by Mark and Liz's abrupt changes, but I liked Mark, and that's why I got married. It's unimaginable that someone would suggest ending a marriage after just one day. It's none of your business. We'll manage just fine. Being competitive, I unintentionally said such things. John replied, I'm sorry for being rude. I apologize for making such an extreme statement. He apologized politely. Until a while ago, I thought he was an extremely unreasonable person, and I might have understood a little why Mark and Liz found John unpleasant. However, he apologized so politely that I couldn't quite understand John anymore. Maybe he really warned me out of kindness with those words. While I was thinking about that, John said, Excuse me, and went into his room. Liz and Mark described John as a weird shut-in, but from my perspective, he's a very polite person. He's the type who can interact with others with good manners, even among working adults. The next day, as I was setting the breakfast on the table, John came downstairs just as he was about to take a drink, so I greeted him. Good morning, John. Would you like to have breakfast together with everyone? Good morning, Noah. Thank you for inviting me, but... Saying that, John looked towards Liz. Liz said, Noah, I have no intention of having breakfast with someone like that. Hurry up and prepare. She shouted like that. I'm fine, so I'll pass. Saying that, John immediately went to his room. I wanted to apologize for my strong response yesterday, but I couldn't do so. Hey, all you need to do is housework. Don't interfere with unnecessary things. Got it? Liz said that while giving me a piercing look. I was stunned by this tone towards a family member. No matter how much she enjoyed harassing her son's wife, I didn't expect her to act this way. And Mark, too, had an incredible change in his attitude. What's this? Curry again for today's menu? I had it for lunch as well. Even if he said such a thing to me, it was problematic. If he wanted something different for lunch, he should have informed me. When I remained silent, Hey, no apology yet. Are you repenting? He shouted. You came here to take care of this house. Understand that properly. Is that so? I was speechless. Mark didn't love me. He just wanted a housekeeper. It was too much. How could someone do such cruel things without hesitation? My well-being didn't matter to them. They just used me for their own comfort. I went upstairs, glancing at Mark and Liz watching TV in the living room, laughing coarsely, and seeming to have a good time. As I went upstairs, tears welled up. Then, a hand offering a tissue appeared gently in front of me. Maybe it's better to leave, after all. There was only one person who said that. When I looked up, there was John. I'm sorry you had to see me like that. I quickly wiped away my tears. Oh, sorry for using your tissue without asking. No, I gave it to you because I wanted you to use it. More importantly, I overheard Mark and Mom's comments. They're really the worst. When John said that, What do you mean by more importantly? I asked. He replied, There have been similar things in the past. So he stated. As I listened to the details, it turned out that Mark had a promise of marriage with another woman before. But just before the wedding, she ran away because Mark and Liz treated her the same way they treat me now. I became frightened upon hearing that. In other words, the kind Mark and Liz before marriage was a lie, to prevent the woman from running away just before the wedding. I felt hopeless. I had been deceived by such a despicable man. But right now, I have nowhere else to go if Mark abandons me. I've become a housewife, and there's no way Mark and Liz would allow me to work part-time. If that happens, I won't even be able to leave this house and rent a room somewhere else. I didn't know what to do, so I could only cry. Then John said, If we keep talking here, they might get suspicious. Would you like to meet at a cafe or somewhere next time? He handed me a piece of paper with his WhatsApp ID on it. I quietly nodded and went to my bedroom. I must escape from this house, no matter what. My survival has just begun like this. I'll be running some errands at the municipal office today, and then stopping by the supermarket on my way back. I told Liz before leaving the house. Liz replied, "If you neglect the housework, I won't forgive you." But then she realized that everything had been meticulously prepared in advance. "If dinner is delayed, I won't accept it." Her words got stuck as she said. I let her words slide and met John at the cafe as planned. I talked to him about how I no longer had a family to rely on. I'd canceled the room I was renting and quit my job, so I had to start over from scratch. It's certainly tough to leave that house in your current situation. The biggest obstacle must be finding a job. Yes, I'm pretty much at the beck and call of Mom and Mark, from early morning to late at night. John pondered for a moment and asked, "Noah, can you paint?" "What?" "Paint." Oh, when I said what, it was a reaction of surprise. "I see. So, can you?" "Well, yes. I actually graduated from an art-related university." "Really?" "Yeah. What about it?" "That's perfect. Actually, I have a friend who's a manga artist and is looking for an assistant. Remote work is okay?" "Is that so?" "Oh, but I don't have a computer right now." "Don't worry. I'll lend you one of my spare computers." "Thank you so much." I wondered why he had spare computers. John, what kind of work do you do?" "You're so kind. You don't ask if I'm a shut-in, unemployed person, do you?" "Well, I mean, you use such polite language and have good grooming. I don't think of you that way. So, are you doing some remote work?" "Yes, I'm actually an engineer." "An engineer?" "I used to be a salaried worker, but now I'm running my own company." "Oh, really? I never expected John to be a business owner." "Yes, I take freelance orders, so it's easier to have a company. There are a few other employees, mainly web designers, who work remotely. Since there are only a few employees, we manage everything remotely." That's why he's always at home, I thought. But Liz and Mark are calling you a shut-in. Aren't you telling them the truth? "I don't think there's any benefit in telling those two." "True. But if you're running a business like that, you could just leave that house, right? Why don't you move out?" It was there that I first learned about John's intentions.
"But my situation is not important right now. We should introduce you to the manga artist first,"
John said, and immediately made a phone call. In no time, a remote interview was scheduled for me with the manga artist. Since Liz always had tea time with the ladies from her classes after Wednesday lessons, we arranged the remote interview during that time. I left a good impression during the interview and was successfully hired. Moreover, to accommodate my situation, they said they would send the hiring paperwork to me, but addressed to John, ensuring confidentiality. Now I had job security. The next step was finding a place to live.
"If you'd like, I have a friend who works as a real estate agent. She can offer you a place at a discounted rate."
John offered. Who was this person? Their qualifications seemed too good to be true. The property search went smoothly, and I found a room that matched my requirements, as everything started falling into place. One day, I got into an argument with Mark.
"Hey, make dinner."
I was awakened by Mark while I was sleeping in the bedroom. It seemed like he had been drinking and was a bit tipsy. "Make dinner? It's not even midnight now, and besides, you said you didn't need dinner, because you had a drinking party today, right?"
"Shut up. You're such a useless wife for not waking up and greeting your husband who just came home. And you don't even cook. You're completely worthless."
His words triggered my anger. What is that supposed to mean? Do you have any idea how hard I've been working for you and Liz? Why do you act so superior?
"That's because you're a wife. Wives should respect their husbands. And your job is housework." It's natural for someone who can't do housework to be criticized. A wife who can't do housework is nothing but trash.
As Mark said that, the door opened and Liz burst into laughter.
Indeed, you're just trash. John is trash too. This place is like a garbage dump.
Liz said, and Mark laughed while saying,
That's right. The trash in this house needs to be taken out.
What do you mean? When I asked, Mark opened a drawer.
I mean this,
he said. It was a divorce application.
You're hopeless. I'll find a wife who can take your place, so we're getting a divorce. Get out of this house quickly.
You're despicable. Treating a prospective wife like a slave?
When you're marrying someone, that's about right. Someone who can replace a housekeeper is the best.
Are you sure that's all you're going to say? You might regret it later, when things get tough.
What are you talking about? You're a jobless housewife with no parents to rely on. Threatening me? I'm not scared of you.
After Mark said that and laughed, Liz also laughed mockingly.
That's true. Trash is just trash, so you can't do anything.
Is that so? I understand Liz and your feelings now. I'll leave this house. I signed the divorce application. I'll file this for you. I put the divorce application in my bag and started packing my things. Liz and Mark watched with malicious smiles.
Now you're homeless. I wonder what you'll do next. Well, it's none of our concern anymore. Do your best, homeless lady.
That's right. It's a perfect opportunity for John to leave as well.
Indeed. Let's throw everything out and renovate her room once she's gone. It'll become even more spacious and luxurious.
Mark and Liz began discussing their plans after kicking us out. Then they went to John's room and told him to pack his things and leave. I had originally planned to leave, but I never expected that John would be kicked out along with me. I regretted getting into a fight with Mark out of anger. I'm sorry, John. It's my fault.
No, please don't worry about it. I've reached my limit with living with those people too. Plus, I've got something interesting now. That fight might have been lucky,
John said with a smile. I didn't understand what he meant exactly, but at least he didn't seem to mind us leaving. 2 days later, on a Wednesday when Liz was out, John and I called a moving company and relocated.
Is the move done?
Liz, who probably didn't want to see our faces, called us while she was out. We've already left, so don't worry.
John left with you, right?
Yes, he moved out with me.
Okay. It's such a relief not to have to see you guys anymore.
Liz said happily and abruptly ended the call. However, Liz and Mark had no idea what would happen next. They didn't know that John and I were plotting revenge. We were on the verge of moving into the rented room when we managed to move our belongings and start our new life. Thanks to John, I would receive alimony from Mark as part of our divorce settlement. In reality, John had secretly recorded Mark's and Liz's statements during our argument, and those statements were undoubtedly considered harassment and emotional abuse towards their son's wife. This evidence was used in the divorce proceedings to claim alimony from Mark. This was the first step in getting back at Mark. The alimony from the divorce proceedings was claimed on my behalf by John's lawyer friend, and Mark, completely terrified, complied with the payment. John, with his lawyer connections, was a mystery to me, but I was truly grateful for his help, so I decided not to pry further. A few days later, Liz suddenly called me, and the number of calls was staggering. My phone just wouldn't stop ringing. I thought I had forgotten to block her calls and reluctantly answered.
Hello, Noah, where are you now?
Why would I tell a complete stranger like you? Besides, what do you want with John?
Don't say that. I need to talk to him, but I can't reach him.
Why do you even care about John?
I have something to say to that kid, but we can't get in touch with him.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Maybe he doesn't like you anymore. I taunted her, and the tone of the conversation shifted.
Don't play games with me. You moved out together, right? You must know where he is. Tell me.
She was really acting tough. It was true that I knew, but there was no way I would tell her. It's a shame, but I don't know. Why don't you try finding it on your own?
Don't mess with me. Where are you even? You have no family, no job, and nowhere to live. If you say you'll apologize deeply, I might forgive you. Well, being a housekeeper is still a requirement, though.
Who would go back to your place? I have a job and a place to live lined up. Unfortunately, there's no merit in going back to you.
What? Are you lying?
Mark seemed surprised, as if he had misunderstood that I had found everything in such a short period. Well, correcting him would be a hassle. Anyway, please don't call me again. If you ever call, or if I see your faces again, I'll report you to the police immediately.
Hey, wait.
I said that and hung up the phone, unilaterally. Then I blocked Liz's number. Mark's number had already been blocked. Liz and Mark must have realized something when they frantically called us. They had been under the mistaken impression that father-in-law had a massive inheritance all along. However, it turned out that John had been transferring a substantial amount of money into Liz's bank account every month. But since Liz thought of John as an unemployed shut-in, she had a ridiculous misunderstanding that the inheritance was being transferred in installments. And when John was kicked out this time, he stopped the transfers. That's when they finally realized who had been providing the money all along. However, it was too late. John had already severed ties with Liz and Mark. Mark didn't have the money to pay me alimony in the divorce proceedings. And Liz, who had been relying on the monthly transfers for her livelihood, would face a considerable hardship when the transfers stopped. Well, they were both responsible for their own actions, so I didn't sympathize with them. By the way, John had purchased a luxurious high-rise apartment in the city and was living comfortably there. The reason such a wealthy person had been sending money home and living with his family was because he had made a promise to father-in-law before he passed away. Unlike Liz, father-in-law had cherished John very much. So despite the cold treatment from Liz and Mark, he had been able to endure it and maintain a balance. And father-in-law said to John,
I may not like Mark, but he's an important family member to me. So after I'm gone, I entrust both of you to each other.
It is sad. To fulfill the promise with father-in-law, John had secretly been sending money to support Mark and Liz, despite being estranged from them. Those two who had no idea about John's kind heart and instead complained about him and kicked him out were truly despicable. I met John once after he moved.
Think I fulfilled Dad's promises enough,
he said. I thought the same, and I wanted him to live his own life from now on. I had been deceived by an awful man, but I was saved by John. I would continue to cherish John as my benefactor and wish for his happiness. 1 year later,
would you marry me if you wish for my happiness?
He proposed to me, but that's another story. Get out! Your old lady smell is ruining my new house. Michaela threw disinfectant on me as I attended her housewarming. Drenched and overwhelmed by the pungent smell, I felt something snap inside me. Standing up silently, I flashed a terrifying smile at Michaela and said, Then I'll clean this up for you. After all, I built it. I went upstairs to Michaela's room to get something. My name is Harmony. I'm a 72-year-old retired confectioner. More precisely, a former pâtissier who ran a cake shop. I retired due to a leg injury. Now I help my son and his wife, who have taken over the business, living a modest life. Harmony, you must be happy your son took over. At the tea parties I occasionally attend, I bring cakes made by my son and his wife, earning praise from the neighbors. Today at the tea party, I was engrossed in fun conversations. When a neighbor mentioned my son, I stared at my tea, lost in thought. A shop with many memories, isn't it? I reminisced about the past. Indeed, my life had been full of ups and downs. I opened my patisserie at 35. After a decade of training in France, I had decided to open my own shop upon returning. My parents opposed, saying a cake shop in the countryside wouldn't work. I defied them, saying, "I'll do it my way," and opened my shop. It became popular in 6 months, becoming the talk of the town. My French-trained skills were praised, attracting customers quickly. My once opposed parents came to respect and fully support me.
Time to think of the next new creation.
Daniel, my husband, supporting our cake shop, spoke to me while preparing for the next day. Summer is tough for sales. Maybe a cold dessert would be a hit. That's what I was talking about with Daniel. That's when we heard the bell at the shop door, and I hurried to the counter. "Welcome!" Oh, it was Michaela, my sister-in-law, who appeared. 2 years older than me, she was always flamboyant. Having moved from the city, she dressed to stand out, enjoying the attention. Today, she wore an actress hat and sunglasses, not fitting for the countryside. Honestly, I disliked her. Her hurtful remarks and belittling of our cake shop were intolerable. Being a doctor at a university hospital, she flaunted her income and education. She only did this when my brother Kendrick wasn't around. I was deeply annoyed by her cowardice. "Boring as ever. The decor's outdated and it's dusty. Do you even clean?" Michaela, worried her fancy clothes would get dirty, was her usual self. I couldn't hide my annoyance, responding curtly. "Did you come just to say that?" "I just stopped by on my way to my new house. Why else would I visit such a place?" While looking around, Michaela carelessly picked up a cookie and placed it roughly at the register. "I can't see this shop lasting, but I'll contribute to the sale since you're Kendrick's sister." She bought a mere $7 cookie with that attitude. Who could warmly welcome such a sister-in-law? If she weren't Kendrick's wife, I'd have her out of here immediately. As I wrapped the product, grappling with these complaints in my heart, Michaela continued her tirade. "Poor Kendrick, having such a failure for his sister. He said he gave up on his own shop because of you." Her words painfully struck my heart. Kendrick had generously helped finance my shop's construction. When I returned and found no support, only Kendrick stood by me. Later, I discovered the money he used was his own saved-up capital for starting a business. "If you hadn't interfered, Kendrick might have had his own shop by now. Really pitiable."
Then why don't you help him financially?
Daniel appeared behind me and retorted sharply at Michaela, glaring at her.
"It's between Harmony and Kendrick, and not for outsiders like us. Only Kendrick has the right to complain about Harmony. Do you even have the right to blame her?"
Daniel, undaunted by Michaela, confronted her. Michaela, seemingly annoyed by Daniel's audacity, furrowed her brows and removed her sunglasses with a puzzled look. "Of course I have the right. That money was mine. You have no business interfering in this."
The funds for Harmony's shop were from before Kendrick married you, right? If Kendrick has no complaints, why should you persistently blame Harmony? Harmony is my wife. Which husband would remain silent while his wife is being maligned?
Daniel shielded me from showing my tears to Michaela. I felt reassured by his presence and grateful to be his wife. Michaela, apparently not amused by Daniel's words, roughly grabbed the wrapped cookies from the counter and left without another word. After she left, we put up the closed sign, and Daniel embraced me.
You endured well.
"Danny, I can't do this anymore. I don't have the confidence to get along with someone like her. Even if she's Kendrick's wife, I can't bear being treated this way."
Are you not going to tell Kendrick?
"I can't. He's already looking after Mom and Dad. I can't trouble him just because I can't get along with her." Kendrick, working as a chef in a hotel, was also taking care of our parents. Despite the long commute he managed, he had saved to open his own shop and be closer to our parents. It was with this in mind that he was saving money.
Money can be earned again. I want to see you succeed as a top patissier. This money is an investment in your future. You'll definitely become famous.
Kendrick assured me, investing $2 million in my startup. I was deeply grateful to Kendrick, and when he married Michaela, I was overjoyed. But I never expected her to be like this. I was tormented daily by what to do.
Tomorrow, we're going to Kendrick's housewarming, right? Maybe you could mention it to him. If Kendrick talks to Michaela, maybe she'll stop.
Tomorrow, we're invited to the housewarming party, and I'll finally see Kendrick after such a long time. Reluctantly, agreeing to the words persuaded by Daniel, I focused on closing up the shop. Lately, I couldn't bring myself to tell Kendrick about Michaela. Kendrick's happiness, while he supported Mom and Dad, was precious. Despite sacrificing his own dream of opening a shop, I couldn't burden him further with Michaela's issue. I just couldn't simply nod to Daniel's suggestion. As days passed without a decision, Daniel and I, with a shortcake in hand, visited Kendrick's new home.
Harmony and Daniel, long time no see. Glad you could make it.
Kendrick welcomed us right in at the doorstep. Michaela was out shopping and wasn't there. I felt relieved not seeing her. Noticing this, Kendrick looked at me worriedly.
What's wrong? You look pale. Is it the new house smell?
No way. Just had a bit too much to drink with Danny last night. I forced a smile to reassure Kendrick. To avoid any awkward conversation, I asked to see around the new house. Kendrick shared that apart from the tidy living room, their personal items were still in boxes. We agreed not to go upstairs as per his request. Soon our parents arrived, and we enjoyed a rare family gathering. Then Daniel seized the opportunity to bring up yesterday's topic.
Sorry to bring this up at a housewarming, but there's something about Michaela we need to discuss.
Wait, Danny. I wasn't ready. Daniel's words made me panic, but he looked at me earnestly, holding my hand.
Harmony, I've seen how hard you've worked, thinking about the family. Keeping your struggles to yourself seems unfair to Kendrick and the others.
Struggles? Harmony, have you been having a hard time? Realizing I was hiding something, everyone looked worried. I regretted my foolish thought of just enduring it all. Actually, I've been harassed by Michaela for a long time.
What?
Everyone was shocked, especially Kendrick. It would be so. Understandably, knowing his wife was bullying his sister-in-law is shocking. Unable to speak, Daniel explained the situation for me. Silence followed. Only heavy air flowed there. I wondered if I should have kept quiet. That's when Kendrick, as if having made a decision, spoke to Mom.
Mom, I've made up my mind.
That's right. No need to hold back any more. Huh? Daniel and I exchanged looks at the unexpected response. Dad explained the situation, leaving us speechless. Just as we were about to ask more. I'm back. It's so hot outside. Is Kendrick not here? Michaela returns home at the worst possible time. The family spirits dampen, as if sensing the charged air of her untimely arrival.
I'm off then.
With those words, Kendrick disappears towards the entrance, and Daniel suggests we store the cake he brought in the fridge for now. As Mom and I move to do so, we reach for the fridge door. Hey, don't you touch our stuff! Shouted at by Michaela, who just entered the living room. Mom and I jump in surprise. I'll take care of the house. Just stay put. It's fine. Michaela, recalling Kendrick is around, snatches the cake from me with a creepy, pleasant smile. Her words seem softened, but there's an underlying sharpness, especially as she roughly takes the cake. Mom, witnessing this, is speechless. Unable to react, she's shocked by such treatment in front of her. Feeling hurt, I urge Mom to join me on the living room sofa. Sitting next to Daniel, I tried to hold back tears. Thank you all for coming to our housewarming today. If you have gifts, I'll gladly accept them. Michaela takes over as if she's the host. Her greedy words irritate both Daniel and me. Our parents, watching her closely, reluctantly present their gift to Michaela. I, not keen but following suit, hand over my gift, which Michaela snatches.
What a boring gift. Typical.
Michaela mutters just loud enough for me to hear. Shocked at her audacity to complain despite receiving a gift, I feel my patience turning into anger. Then Michaela takes out a bottle of disinfectant from a supermarket bag. "Well then, let's wrap this up," she says, splashing the disinfectant on me. Drenched, I'm stunned, and my family cries out in alarm. "So I guess it's the height of the party." Just as she said that, Michaela turned towards me and splashed the disinfectant on me. I was drenched in disinfectant, completely soaked. Shocked by the sudden turn of events, I was speechless, and my family around me gasped. "Hey, Michaela, what are you doing?" Mom, more than anyone else, raised her voice and stood in front of Michaela to protect me, and everyone glared at Michaela. Michaela sneered at this and threw her final words at me. "The smell of an older lady will dirty my new house. Get out." At that moment, something inside me snapped. Silent, I stood up, with a frighteningly pleasant smile towards her. "So, you hate filth that much? Well, let me clean it up for you. After all, I built this place." Michaela, seeing me smile, seemed terrified and stepped back. I snatched all the presents from her, ignoring Michaela's complaints, and headed to the second floor. Conveniently, there was a plate with Michaela's name on it in front of the door, and I boldly walked inside. I picked up a cardboard box, still packed, and dropped it from the second floor to the first with a bang. "Hey, what are you doing?" Michaela tried to stop me as the boxes tumbled down one after another, but with so many boxes rolling down from the second floor, she couldn't come up and could only desperately scream in vain as I dropped the last box. "Do you realize what you're doing?" Michaela, showing her true colors in front of Kendrick, glared at me with a devilish face. Unconcerned about her, I went downstairs and asked Daniel with a smile, "Can you hold back that noisy trash for me? We can't let the dirty germs out. The new house will get dirty with the smell of mold, right?" Daniel must have been scared, too. The words from my ever-smiling face were no longer treating Michaela as a human, and I was throwing all her belongings outside with apparent delight. People might think I've lost my mind. It can't be helped that you think so. "Stop it, Kendrick. What are you just staring at? Stop her. Isn't your sister out of her mind?" Michaela was screaming desperately. However, Kendrick did not respond. Instead, he silently watched my next move. The entrance was overflowing with Michaela's cardboard boxes. A mess. But it couldn't be helped. After throwing everything outside, I clapped my hands and walked towards Michaela for the final touch. "Well, now it's just Michaela left. What do you mean? You think you can get away with this? Who knows? I can't hear the threats of trash." My smile must have been like a mask, mechanical and eerie. Michaela gasped at my creepy smile, looking at me fearfully. Without paying her any attention, I instructed Daniel to kick her out along with her slippers. "Hey, stop! No, Kendrick, help me!" Michaela begged Kendrick for help until she was thrown out, but Kendrick had no intention of listening to her. At this point, I understood what Kendrick and the others meant. "There's not a single person on your side here. Get out if you understand. This is my house after all." "What? What are you talking?" Before Michaela could finish, Daniel dragged her out, pushing her outside the entrance. Daniel, who managed to kick Michaela out, immediately closed the door, and very thoroughly double-locked and even chained it. Michaela, now completely unable to enter, was left outside in the summer heat. She banged on the door and screamed for about 10 minutes, but her strength seemed to wane gradually. To make matters worse, neighbors came by and started whispering about her shabby appearance. "Mommy, look! That lady is outside in her slippers." "Hey, don't do that. Don't point." Even passing children mocked Michaela. For her, so full of pride, this public humiliation was hell. She crammed all her belongings into her car and fled the scene that day. Seeing this, I regained my composure and hastily turned to Kendrick. "What should we do, Kendrick? I'm sorry, that was—"
"It's okay. I know the situation. Besides, we should be the ones apologizing."
Kendrick suggested going back to the living room, and Mom had prepared tea and cake. I borrowed clothes from Kendrick and quickly changed to avoid catching a cold. After changing, I sat on the living room sofa, and Kendrick explained why he had been silent all this time.
That woman, she was actually harassing Mom in the same way.
What? Shocked by this sudden revelation, Daniel and I looked at Mom in surprise.
It all happened when I wasn't around. Mom told me yesterday. She was constantly harassed and mocked by her. Even made fun of you. It was really terrible.
Michaela had been bad-mouthing me every time we met, suggesting that my poor upbringing was due to Mom's bad parenting, and if the parents had more money, Kendrick wouldn't have had to struggle. That's what I confessed to Kendrick yesterday. Then he said that since you built the house, we should explain the situation to you and your family before deciding what to do next. And that's what led to today. Michaela, who even tormented Mom, could never be forgiven. Trembling with anger, I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Seeing this, Daniel gently placed his hand over mine.
Harmony, I know how much you care about family. Maybe you don't have to endure this anymore.
Danny.
After hearing all this, I definitely can't go on with her either.
Resolved by Kendrick's determination, I also steeled myself to teach that woman a lesson. We pledged to act, and did so immediately. The next day, my phone was flooded with a storm of calls from Michaela. Kendrick, Daniel, and I decided to meet her alone. What do you mean by this? Kicking me out of the house? You won't get away with what you did. We agreed to meet at my office, and as soon as she entered, her shrill voice echoed. Wearing the same clothes as yesterday, with dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, Michaela arrived looking miserable. Her loud voice was irritating, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled sweetly, further infuriating her with my words. I cleaned up because you said the new house gets dirty, right? What? I don't want someone as ugly as you in the house. The new house will get dirty with germs, right? Saying so, I put my index finger to my lips, feigning cuteness. As unsuitable as it felt for me, it seemed to affect Michaela. Her face turned red as a boiled lobster, showing her anger. Who's ugly? I'm far more beautiful than a third-rate woman like you. To say that with the same clothes as yesterday, and such a dirty face, impressive. Whose fault do you think it is that I ended up like this? A woman like you acting all high and mighty. Doubling down on my previous provocations, I taunted Michaela, which angered her enough to come at me. Daniel stood protectively in front of me, and Kendrick, usually mild-mannered, showed his anger for the first time.
Enough. You're in no position to talk down to Harmony and her family.
What? Why should I be the one getting scolded? The bad one is clearly that woman. Michaela remained defiant, even against Kendrick's words. She must have looked down on Kendrick as well, deep down. She was after money. Thinking Kendrick had money and blaming me for losing it, she must have despised me. Despite having her own earnings, her greed showed what a despicable woman she was. As I glared at her with utter contempt, Kendrick slammed a piece of paper in front of her.
I have no intention of going on with someone who can't even value my family. We're getting a divorce.
The paper Kendrick presented was a divorce petition, already signed by him and his father as guarantor. Seeing this, Michaela suddenly regained her composure and clung to Kendrick in a panic. Wait, a divorce? Just wait.
I don't want to hear what you have to say. My mind is made up, and if you refuse the divorce, I'll go to court if I have to.
Where do you think the money for that will come from? You don't have the financial power, so don't talk big. I'll support financially, so don't worry. Michaela initially tried to act humble, but Kendrick's words revealed her true nature again. Now that we had proof of her looking down on Kendrick financially, we could crush her without remorse. Smiling, I intervened between them. I noticed that Michaela seemed to be trying to explain what she's talking about, so I say something more. Didn't you know? Besides this store, I have several others. I have enough financial power to fight you. Michaela gasped in surprise at my words. Previously, a TV show had featured one of my regular customers praising my shop. The reporter raved about its beauty and deliciousness, leading to its popularity. Requests for more stores came flooding in, and now I have a nationwide chain. Kendrick was the only one who supported the opening of my shop. As a thank you, I gifted him that house. I had also heard about your planning to open a clinic nearby, and thought you'd need money. Michaela's face turned pale upon hearing the whole situation. She must have realized she had picked a fight with the wrong person. She was speechless. Since I still hold the property rights, I am the owner of that house. I can sue you for trespassing. What will you do? Will you fight? With a smile, I cornered Michaela, who seemingly gave in and began to profusely apologize. Even though Michaela continued to apologize, our family had no intention of forgiving her, and we kicked her out of the store. Kendrick and Michaela eventually went to court for a divorce. Given everything that had happened, our lawyer assured us that the divorce would be granted. Our family savored this joy. During the time she was kicked out, Michaela's face became well known in the neighborhood, and no one was sympathetic towards her. Her clinic had no patients and closed within 3 months. She shamefully fled to the city. Thus our family found peace. I continued managing my shops, and Kendrick finally opened his own. Kendrick, Dad, and Mom started living in the new house, which we remodeled for accessibility. Harmony, what happened? You suddenly went quiet. I was reminiscing during a tea party with everyone. Snapped back to reality by a neighbor, I responded. Sorry, it's nothing. I'm just really grateful to those kids. Thanks to them, I'm now enjoying a peaceful retirement with my husband. As we enjoyed the cake, I reflected on how these nearly 40 years were the stepping stones to my current happiness.
A family without blood ties isn't a real family. Mom, how could you say that? Apologize. Talking back to your mom. Mindy, you've corrupted Martin. Break up with him now.
Just married, I was troubled by my mother-in-law. Not only did she dislike me, but she also despised my relationship with my non-biological mom, always saying hurtful things. My name is Mindy, 28 years old. I married Martin, who is 2 years older, 6 months ago. We lived separately from our in-laws and aimed to buy our own home, both of us working and sharing household chores. Martin is helpful around the house and very kind, even cooking when I'm busy with work. I felt happy with our peaceful life together. My family situation is a bit complex. I have no blood relation with my mom. In other words, she's my stepmother. My parents divorced when I was 6, and my biological mother left. I have no fond memories of my biological mother. All I remember is her flashy makeup and her figure leaving at night. On nights she was home, she would argue with Dad, angrily throwing and breaking things, and those hateful eyes when she looked at me. Those eyes are unforgettable. That was my memory of my biological mother. Dad was busy with work, but tried to spend time with me, with the help of his sister, my Aunt Serena. But the absence of my biological mother weighed heavily on my young mind, and I often had nightmares and cried at night. I felt lonely without a mother, but with the help of Dad, Serena, and a counselor, I gradually regained my brightness and made friends in elementary school. About 2 years later, Dad remarried. Florence, a modestly dressed woman of 35 like Dad at the time, had a smile that lit up the room. "Nice to meet you," she said with a smile that seemed to instantly brighten the room. I still remember that radiant smile vividly to this day. Dad and Florence met me through an acquaintance. Serena, worried about Dad taking care of me while dealing with his wife's betrayal, arranged a dinner party. Dad was initially reluctant but agreed to meet, out of gratitude and Serena's persistence. Florence was also hesitant about the sudden introduction, especially with a man who had a child. However, Florence and Dad felt an instant connection and were drawn to each other as they spent more time together. Considering Dad's remarriage, Florence's first marriage, and my trauma from my biological mother, they took their time before deciding to marry. Even though they took their time, I couldn't immediately accept Florence as a mom, and there were months of confusion. But there were no worries like you see on TV about stepmothers mistreating stepchildren. Surprisingly, Florence fit right in with Dad's relatives, and Dad smiled more often. The meals were always delicious and warm. Above all, she was kind to me. Gradually, my heart warmed up, and at some point, I can't quite recall, I naturally started calling her Mom. Though occasionally people would look at us differently, knowing she was my stepmother, Mom's cheerful and vibrant personality, along with her active participation in school and community events, eventually silenced any whispers. Our family was truly happy. I then graduated high school, went to college, and successfully landed a job. In my 4th year of working, I met my future husband, Martin. A year ago, after dating for about 4 years, Martin proposed to me. I had told Martin about Mom and my biological mother when we started considering marriage. So when he seriously considered marrying me, I was overjoyed and accepted without hesitation. When we went to a family meeting, my future father-in-law warmly welcomed me. However, my future mother-in-law was different. Upon hearing about my family background, she sighed deeply and said, "Your parents are divorced, huh? And remarried while you were still young?"
Hey, cut it out.
Father-in-law tried to stop her, but mother-in-law continued. "I mean, growing up in such an environment. In our family line, divorced and remarried couples are..." I wanted to respond, but I was intimidated by mother-in-law's domineering tone and attitude. I could only hang my head in silence. Martin held my hand and said calmly,
Mom, don't be rude. I'm marrying Mindy.
After a brief pause, mother-in-law coldly said, "Well, think it over," ending the conversation for the day. Martin, who had been bothered by mother-in-law's interference since childhood, said he had anticipated her attitude when introducing me. "I will bring my son's marriage partner," mother-in-law had declared. Ignoring mother-in-law's bluster, Martin chose me. While I was worried about mother-in-law, I loved Martin, and hoping she would understand one day, I decided to get married. Mother-in-law seemed to assume that we would naturally live with them, and that I would become a homemaker, devoted to serving the in-laws, but Martin, fed up with mother-in-law's meddling, firmly refused. We rented a convenient place for commuting and both worked. Father-in-law didn't say anything about our decision. However, mother-in-law, apparently very displeased, would call my mobile phone, not my husband's, every 3 days. She'd call around noon, likely targeting my lunchtime. The calls would always start with, "It's only natural to live together, don't you even know that?" and progress to, "It's absurd for a daughter-in-law to work. Don't neglect your household duties. A daughter-in-law who doesn't respect her husband is a failure." And, "Become a homemaker quickly and think about having grandchildren." Without even acknowledging my responses, she just kept talking and abruptly hung up the phone. That had become the usual routine. She never forgot her catchphrase, "You've led my son astray." Lately, phone calls weren't enough, and she would visit our house without an appointment. On my days off during the week, she'd wake me up early with the doorbell, and in addition to her usual nagging, she would check every corner of our house and complain about the housework. Since childhood, I have been unable to express my emotions well, and tend to shrink and become frightened in front of assertive people, becoming quieter the more I am spoken to. I knew that this would only further irritate and embolden the other party, but I felt helpless to change it. If it was just complaints or sarcastic comments about household chores or being a daughter-in-law, I could somehow tune them out. However, mother-in-law would occasionally make remarks touching upon my own mom. One day, while watching a diaper commercial on TV that showed a baby being held by its mother, my mother-in-law would say things like, "Blood ties are really important, aren't they?" Or, "If you haven't given birth to a child yourself, you can't really feel love for it," in a tone that was different from her usual sarcasm. "That's not true. There's nothing to be ashamed of in my family. What does blood relation even mean? Please stop making such assumptions." Every time my family was mentioned, I would scream these thoughts in my head, but whenever I saw my mother-in-law's eyes, my body would freeze and I would fall silent. Gradually, my mother-in-law started making sarcastic remarks even in front of Martin. Each time, Martin would firmly respond to his mother, but the more he defended me, the more his mother escalated. I didn't want to cause trouble for Martin, who was desperately trying to protect me. I didn't want to lose such a kind person. Even though she was tough on me, she's the only mom Martin has, so I shouldn't let our relationship get strained because of me. All I have to do is endure it. That's what I kept telling myself. At times like that, I desperately wanted to hear my mom's voice and would reach for my phone, but remembering the smiles of my parents, who truly blessed my marriage, I couldn't bring myself to press the call button. While being troubled by such issues with my mother-in-law, one evening, half a year into my marriage, I got a call from Dad. He informed me that Mom was in critical condition due to an accident. He said he would explain more when I arrived, but I panicked and rushed to the hospital after quickly explaining the situation to my office. The hospital near my parents' home was about 2 hours away, and I was worried sick the entire time. I hadn't seen my parents since the wedding. I had been preoccupied with my job, my life with Martin, and the harassment from my mother-in-law, except for when I was in the train or taxi. I ran without caring about my surroundings, but I didn't make it in time. My dad must have rushed from his workplace too. His suit was wrinkled, and Serena was wearing sandals, the kind she wore when going to the nearby supermarket. It seemed that my mom had fallen down the stairs at a local shopping mall while trying to help a little girl who was about to fall. The girl was safe thanks to my mom holding her tightly. My mom was still breathing, but had passed away shortly before I arrived. Although my mom had broken several bones, her face remained untouched. After a while, Martin arrived to support me, gently holding my shoulder. The hospital was bustling with police, the girl who was saved, and her parents, but I just watched them as if it was happening to someone else. Returning to the hospital room and holding my mom's hand, I remembered my mom, who used to say, "Make sure you don't accidentally eat my arm," while holding a boneless ham and laughing heartily. It was unbelievable. She's just sleeping. She'll surely wake up tomorrow. But my mom didn't wake up. Mom. No matter how many times I called, my mom didn't respond. In front of my eyes, my motionless mom lay, but I couldn't come to terms with this reality. Due to the funeral and matters related to the accident, I decided to use my accumulated paid leave and stay at my childhood home. I was worried about Dad, so when I told Martin about it, he understood and agreed it was necessary. However, Mother-in-law didn't feel the same way. While at my parents' house, she called just once. "Let me know the date and time of the funeral. I can't make plans otherwise." She spoke in a detached tone. Her words weighed heavily on me. Still unable to accept Mom's death, and unable to converse, I simply said, "I'll let Martin know." "Oh, okay." And with that, the call ended. With Grandma and Serena's help, we were busy preparing for the funeral. We decided to have a small family funeral. But on the night of the wake, many neighbors who had heard of Mom's passing came to pay their respects. They likely worried for Dad and me, bringing us food and sweets. The girl Mom had saved and her parents also came. Her parents bowed their heads to us repeatedly. The girl was crying so hard she could hardly speak, repeating, I'm sorry." Her cries echoed through the room, and all the neighbors, who were trying to be cheerful and considerate, began to cry too. While I still couldn't accept Mom's untimely death, seeing the girl, I couldn't find it in me to blame her. Rather, I quietly thought it was good she was safe. After the neighbors left, the living room fell silent. I sat blankly beside my sleeping Mom when Serena sat next to me, took my hand, and began to speak. "Florence couldn't have children." Caught off guard, I turned to Serena. She continued, "It seems it was due to her constitution. She was once left by her fiancé because of it, and had given up on marriage. She laughed it off, saying she loved her job, but I think it was hard for her. She was always saying how happy she was to have you as a daughter. When you first called her Mom, she called me, crying tears of joy." Serena said this with a smile, but tears welled in her eyes. "Mom." I buried my face in Serena's chest and cried out loud.
The next morning, Martin, father-in-law, and mother-in-law arrived at my childhood home. Seeing my tear-streaked face, Martin embraced my shoulders. In front of father-in-law and Martin, mother-in-law, like father-in-law, offered condolences and words of comfort to Dad and me, though she seemed displeased. Even after we arrived at the crematorium, a staff member kindly guided me, feeling a little unsteady, to the family waiting room, suggesting I take a break. I wanted some alone time and headed to the hallway. I heard voices from the cool depths of the hallway. It seemed mother-in-law was on the phone with someone. I inadvertently stopped and held my breath. Yes, it finally just ended. It was really long. I didn't know who she was talking to, but I understood she was talking about Mom's funeral. Attending the funeral at daughter-in-law's house is just tiresome, and it's far, too. Maybe we should take advantage of this and go to a hot spring on the way back. In a flirty tone I had never heard before, mother-in-law continues talking, oblivious to my presence. Mother-in-law keeps going. Finally, the nuisance is gone, so Martin will probably come back. Well, I don't need a stupid daughter-in-law raised by a stepmother, but I want to be freed from chores and taking care of Stanley, too. Just think of it as hiring a useless housekeeper. Mother-in-law, not realizing that I'm listening, continues to talk cheerfully. Oh, the stepmother's insurance money will come in, right? That'll make things easier. Even the foolish mother-daughter duo can be of some use. Then she let out, so boring. They should just hurry up and burn it. And laughed. At that moment, something snapped inside me. I approached mother-in-law and stood behind her. Mother-in-law was surprised and flustered, but I grabbed her cell phone and dragged her to the lobby. When we got to where the relatives were, mother-in-law shook off my hand and shouted, "What are you doing?" Everyone around us was surprised, but I didn't notice. You can make fun of me all you want, but I won't allow any insults to Mom. Mom was a much better mother than you ever were. Mother-in-law was momentarily taken aback by my strong words, but quickly recovered and loudly retorted, "What are you saying? A stepmother is bound to be a worthless woman. Such a poorly raised woman is not suitable for our family, and I hate your insecure face and attitude." Angry and trembling, I stared into mother-in-law's eyes and suddenly remembered my biological mother. The reason I continued to fear mother-in-law was because her disdainful eyes were just like my biological mother's. My trauma resurfaced for a moment, but my hatred towards mother-in-law and anger at her abusive words were stronger, and I couldn't hold back. "Rosalie, what did you just say? You said to hurry up and burn it, right?" With tears streaming down my face, I stared intently into mother-in-law's eyes. Mother-in-law, mocking me, said, "I said it, so what? Stop crying over a stepmother and just hurry up and burn it." And laughed derisively. At those words, my anger peaked, and before I knew it, I had grabbed mother-in-law's chest and slapped her hard. Mom was always kind. When I came home from school, she would greet me with a smile, saying, "Welcome back." She helped me with my homework. If I was watching TV instead of doing my homework, she would turn off the TV, take out my homework from my school bag, and sit right next to me. Sometimes it felt annoying, but when I solved a difficult math problem, she would gently pat my head. When I was crying, she would stop her chores, take me on her lap, and hug me gently. Sometimes she scolded me, and we had many fights during my adolescence. I could always be honest with Mom. When I got married, she was the happiest and cried more than Dad. She never spoke ill of others or complained. The neighbors were kind to us because of Mom's personality and efforts. I was able to become independent as a working adult, and Dad could smile and stay healthy because Mom was there. I will never allow anyone to insult such a wonderful mom. As mother-in-law dramatically collapsed, and I was about to grab her again, Dad restrained me from behind, and I came back to my senses as if waking up. Mother-in-law rushed to father-in-law crying, "Mindy hit me, help!" She clung to father-in-law. However, father-in-law calmly forced mother-in-law to her knees, knelt beside her, and pressed her head to the floor in a gesture of apology.
"Mindy, Stephen, and all our family members, I apologize for my wife's disrespectful behavior.
Everyone was stunned by father-in-law's sudden act of contrition, but mother-in-law broke free and began to rant. "Stanley, it's Mindy's fault, right? You saw what she did. She's not fit for our family. Divorce her. Divorce." To this, father-in-law responded in a calm but firm voice.
"We are the ones getting divorced."
The room fell even more silent at these words.
What? Why? She hit me. I'm not the criminal. Are you siding with this foolish woman instead of your son?
Father-in-law, still calm, said,
"It's over,"
and turned to me.
"Mindy, I'm sorry. I knew about my wife's behavior and couldn't stop her. The verbal abuse she hurled at you is unforgivable, and I'm equally guilty for not doing anything. I'm truly sorry."
He bowed deeply again.
What are you talking about? I did nothing wrong, right, Martin?
Mother-in-law tried to cozy up to Martin, but he coldly shifted away and walked over to father-in-law, presenting his cell phone. It was mother-in-law's phone that I had confiscated. Father-in-law stared at the phone for a moment and then said,
"Let's discuss this when we get home."
After bowing to us again, he led mother-in-law out of the crematorium, almost dragging her. The moment they left, I collapsed to the floor, drained of energy. I was about to apologize for slapping Martin's mom in front of everyone, even after the horrible things she said, when Martin embraced me first, saying,
"I'm sorry for not protecting you until now."
And with that, he gave me a hug. Serena told me, "You did great," and affectionately ruffled my hair. What was supposed to be a small family funeral had turned into a huge confrontation. Months later, father-in-law and mother-in-law did indeed get divorced. It turned out that mother-in-law had been having an affair. The person she was talking to in the crematorium hallway was her lover. Father-in-law had suspected mother-in-law's increased spending and outings and had hired a private investigator. He had consulted Martin secretly, who was still skeptical and wanted to believe in mother-in-law. But that day, when he saw the screen of the cell phone I had taken from mother-in-law, he realized father-in-law was right. He quickly arranged a lawyer, presented the evidence to mother-in-law, and announced the divorce. Mother-in-law opposed vehemently and tearfully apologized to father-in-law, but father-in-law said,
"I won't demand alimony from you, a homemaker. Consider it a severance payment. If you don't like it, sue me for compensation."
Reluctantly, mother-in-law agreed to the divorce. Father-in-law didn't demand any compensation, but it turns out the affair partner also had a spouse, who apparently did insist on being compensated. Mother-in-law, who never worked, has no means to pay. She has no choice but to take up part-time jobs and pay back little by little. She brought it upon herself. Mother-in-law called Martin several times, asking him to mediate a reconciliation, but Martin firmly refused. I received a call saying,
"It's all your fault. I lost everything. You're a devil. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I'll sue you. If you don't want that, pay me compensation."
The old me would have just cowered in silence, but not anymore. I'm recording this conversation. Is it okay if I report this extortion to the police? I said, and she hung up. After that, I received no more calls. Truthfully, I wasn't recording anything. After the phone harassment stopped, she attacked our house once. After incessantly ringing the doorbell, she prostrated herself at the front door for a long time.
"I'm sorry. Martin is misunderstanding. Apologize to Stanley for me,"
she shouted through the intercom. "If I have to, I'll call the police," I warned. Dejected, she left. Although it wasn't the sole reason, we moved right after mother-in-law's attack. Martin was transferred, so I quit my job to go with him. We changed our phone numbers at the same time. Of course, we haven't told mother-in-law our new address or phone number. We've told father-in-law and dad, and we're discussing having a meal at our new place once we're settled. According to the neighbors we were close to before moving, mother-in-law was seen lingering in front of our empty apartment and was reported by the next-door neighbor and taken away by the police. We have no idea what happened to mother-in-law after that. I was worried about Dad, but he said,
"If I stay depressed, I'll be laughed at by Florence. Thanks to Florence, our family was happy. I have to carry on Florence's strength to repay her."
and sent us off with a smile. I feel the same way. I can't stay scared and sad forever. I can't waste the love Mom gave me and Dad, supporting us even in hard times. I was raised by such a wonderful mom. From the bottom of my heart, I want to protect the ones I love with a bright smile, just like Mom did for me.